Testing. Testing.
Please be upstanding for His Honourable the Mayor and Deputy Mayor.
Good evening. Please take a seat. Can I have a pen? Sorry, can I have a pen? Brilliant. Thanks. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Council. My name is Councillor Adrian Mather. I'm the Mayor of Wokingham and will chair this meeting. Before we start, I would like to go through a few preliminaries. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live. A reminder that members do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. Can members ensure that your nameplate is clearly displayed in front of you? May I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timings set out in the Constitution. I would like to remind members to be mindful to speak directly into their microphones when speaking. If members turn away from the microphone, The sound will not be picked up for online attendees. I'm aware that there is significant public interest in one of our agenda items this evening, namely the local plan update. As a result, I will be proposing to councillors that this item is allocated an additional hour to ensure that all councillors wishing to speak on this item are able to do so. I will therefore be proposing this item be extended from 30 minutes to 1 hour and 30 minutes. Further, I will also be moving this item ahead of the home to school transport appeals item in terms of the agenda order of business. I feel that this is only right given the level of public interest in this item. I am also aware that we have a number of questions listed on the agenda related to this agenda item from members of the public, which are welcomed. It is important that any public in attendance this evening maintain quiet during the proceedings unless they have pre-arranged to ask a question. We must be able to carry out proceedings without disruption. Finally, I would like to say a few words on points of order. I would like to remind councillors that any member wishing to raise a point of order must ensure that the point of order relates to an alleged breach of the council rules of procedure or the law. The member must indicate the rule or law and the way in which they consider it has been broken. My ruling as mayor on this is final, and I will be adhering strictly to the rules on this. Before we start the meeting, I believe Stephen has a statement to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Wokingham, as we all know, is a great place to live and work. Part of its success is based on embracing people of different cultures and ethnicities and recognising that we all, regardless of who we are, have an important contribution to make. We are committed as a council to working to remove the barriers that prevent members of our community realising their true potential and living happy and fulfilling lives. We believe such an approach benefits not just individuals and families, but society more generally, as we all win if the talent within our community is given the opportunity to flourish. I hope I speak for all councillors when I say we will not allow elements that wish to promote disharmony, fear, and hatred to undermine the truly inclusive society we are working towards in Wokingham. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Stephen. Susan, are there any apologies?
There are. Councillor Stuart Munro, Councillor Paul Fishwick, Councillor Wayne Smith, and Councillor Norman Jorgensen will be attending online.
Thank you very much. May I sign the minutes of the annual council meeting held on the 25th of July 2024 as a correct record? May I have a show of hands, those for? Those against? Abstentions? All right, that's carried. Thank you. I will sign that after the meeting. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Stephen Conway, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to declare an interest in relation to item 40 on the agenda relating to council-owned companies. I am a director of Wokingham Borough Council Holding Company.
Thank you. And Prue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to declare an interest in the same item, item 40. I'm also a director of the holding company.
Thank you. And Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to declare a personal interest in agenda item 36 as our foster child uses this service. I've taken advice on this and I'm allowed to speak and to vote in due course.
Thank you, Stephen, and David.
Thank you. I have to declare an interest also on item 40 as I'm a director of Optalis.
Thank you for that.
Can I do a point of order?
You need to quote the point of order, please.
Sorry, point of order.
Yes.
One of the items on the agenda is about the winter fuel allowance.
No, you need to quote the number. Sorry,
I can't find it on the agenda.
you have to follow the process.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll drop it, don't worry.
Okay, move on to the next section, which is Mayor's announcements. During the summer holidays, WBC officers and partners provide activities for children at up to 26 sites across the borough. I was not aware of this, but I saw this firsthand at the Finchemstead Baptist Centre. I want to publicly thank all the officers and partner organisations for their commitment and hard work during these weeks when a lot of people would normally be on holiday. This year, CLASP, Freely Fruity and Soulscape received the prestigious King's Award for voluntary service. On behalf of all the residents who receive help and support from these organisations, I would like to thank everyone involved. Alongside the Deputy Lieutenants, I have officiated a number of citizenship ceremonies. It is so pleasing to see the emotion in people's faces when they are officially welcomed into this wonderful borough, sometimes fleeing war and persecution. This year, Mindsets Festival was bigger than ever. This reminds us that we should all consider how busy our lives are and the stresses that constant access to mobile phones, social media can put on everybody. It is good to see so many different therapies aimed at reducing our stress levels, hopefully enabling us to be more tolerant of each other. Now we move on to public question time. Please can I remind everybody that supplementary questions must relate either to the original question or the response that is given to that question and can be no longer than 1 minute. Yes, sorry. Before that, I would like to propose that Council Procedure Rule 4221, timing and order of business, be suspended to allow all public questions to be heard. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Members in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Those against? Abstentions? That's carried. I would also like to remind executive members that responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes, and these will be timed. We have 10 public questions. Charles Hockin to ask a question.
Good evening. I reported a parking anomaly to parking services on the 4th of May 2024. The anomaly is that my bank statement shows that I parked in a different location than I actually did. This caused confusion and made me think of a possible fraud taking place, although no fraud has taken place. To date, I have not received any answer to why this is happening and what the council has done about it. If I can explain to everybody else, my banking app shows when I park in Woodley that I'm actually parking in Denmark Street in Wokingham. Now that might sound trivial, but if you're in a serious domestic dispute and evidence, it could be used, or a criminal matter. So if you're going to have a location on the banking app, can it be accurate?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Charles. You'll have already noticed that I'm not Paul Fishwick. I'm afraid you have the B team stepping in to answer your question because Paul, as you heard earlier, has had to send his apologies as he's ill. But thank you for your question. And I want to apologise for the confusion that this matter has clearly caused. And please be assured that this is most definitely not a fraud issue. It's just a reporting error. where the wrong car park is shown on your statement. Payments from all our car parks are centrally received and accounted for, with financial audits being undertaken by separate departments. Officers are aware of the issue you've raised, and we've had previously informed you, I think, that we've reported this matter to our merchant bank suppliers for investigation. Unfortunately, this is an issue that the Council is unable to resolve directly. We have recently spoken to the suppliers, and unfortunately, they have as yet been unable to establish the cause of the issue. They have, however, requested that we obtain further information from you to try and help them narrow down the cause. I'm not quite sure what that means. An officer from the parking team will therefore be in contact with you as soon as possible, if they haven't already done so. Thank you.
Mr. Hockin, do you have a supplementary question?
I don't know what more information you need. I have given you screenshots of my bank app. I have used 2 different locations in Woodley. I have supplied these through parking services. Surely this is just a coding thing. I thought this is a trivial matter which would be resolved by parking services within a week, but obviously not. So this is still ongoing since May or before that. Not happy.
No, I understand you're not being happy, Charles, and all I can do is apologise for the situation. As I tried to say in the original answer, which was prepared for Paul, it's our merchant bank suppliers that are the cause of the difficulty. We are trying to resolve it, and apologies if you have already been asked for information and you've given that already. All I can say is I will try and encourage our highways officers to be in touch and make sure we can resolve this as speedily as possible.
Paul Stevens, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Stephen Conway, Executive Member for the Local Plan. As the person in charge of the local plan and someone who is on record as saying how affordable houses can only be afforded if developer profits are sufficient to cover the S106 payments, how can you justify spending an estimated £30 million on a road bridge over the M4 in order to make the Loddon Garden Village viable? Would not that money be better spent on actual houses?
Thank you for your question, Paul. You are right that I want to enable us to secure more affordable housing to address unmet local need. But all housing development, whether it's affordable or market, needs to be supported by appropriate infrastructure. Transport assessment work undertaken by the Council indicates that a new bridge over the M4 is necessary as part of a wider package of active travel and highway improvements to help provide a sustainable new community. I'm glad to say that the viability assessment supporting the proposed submission plan indicates that it is feasible for the proposed Garden Village to provide both the bridge, all other infrastructure and the level of affordable housing that the plan is seeking, which is higher than that sought by current planning policy.
Mr. Stevens, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Okay, thank you. I understand the precise nature of the internal streets and access links will be refined over time as the proposals progress in conjunction with detailed traffic modelling. At this stage, however, it seems that an allowance has been made for the new link over the motorway to comprise a dual carriageway. Should such a dual carriageway continue across the Loddon Valley Garden Village, from the roundabout where Observer Way meets Reading Road, across the M4, then join in Lower Early Way at Meldrith Way, it will first bisect the locally valued historic asset listed in the Ardfield and Barkham Neighbourhood Plan, which is the Chestnut Avenue. It's a line of 2 trees leading from the old rectory to the remains of the old church. After it's bisected that asset, it would then breach the mature trees screening the M4 from the Lower Early Way. Another leg of this road would pass through the newly adopted country park to get to Hatch Farm Way, requiring more trees to be lost, and causing more traffic chaos as the construction work causes Mill Lane to be closed to through traffic.
Can you get to the question, please?
Which, incidentally, was gridlocked this evening. It seems you're happy to spend the money that could well have paid for over 1,000 new affordable homes on a road bridge that will encourage greater car use.
I need a question, please.
Are you also comfortable with building where there is currently very limited access to public transport, when other sites such as Ashridge and Twyford both offer good road links, and at Twyford proximity to a railway station? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that supplementary, Paul. As you said right at the beginning of your comments, there is still a lot of work, detailed work to be done that I believe will demonstrate that the harmful effects you just described can be mitigated or removed. You did mention 2 alternative sites, which of course have been thoroughly appraised according to all of the technical data that has been provided to us. Those sites that you mentioned were both thoroughly tested against national and local policies, and the critical issue for us in selecting sites is threefold. First, availability of land. Is a landowner promoting it to us? Second, the deliverability of that site. Can it actually deliver the houses required in the time available? And the third is, does it actually comply with all of the policy requirements? Now, you mentioned 2 other sites. Both of those were judged to be unsuitable as compared with the 3rd site, which is the one that obviously concerns you most. And I understand that. But we did go through a thorough technical appraisal by officers, which has led to this conclusion.
Mr. Humphreys, do you have a...
I certainly don't.
Sorry, Mr. Stevens. Oh, was that the supplementary? Sorry. Yes, sorry. Sorry, apologies. Mr. Humphreys, would you like to ask your question, please?
Well, obviously Paul's not here, so I guess you're getting this one as well, Stephen. Paul's been very defensive of the so-called road repair strategy adopted by the Highways Department, but I'd like to know if, hand on heart, he really believes and is satisfied with their botched jobs, a couple of illustrative examples of which are shown in the accompanying photos which have been distributed. The first set of pictures taken in Shefford Crescent shows that a highways officer painted an outline of a large rectangle of tarmac requiring repair, but only a fraction of it was actually repaired, with a large hole in the marked zone simply ignored. The other photos are of multiple potholes at the junction of Sarham Crescent and Crutchley Road. Whilst all the holes were of similar size, some were randomly marked for repairs, while others remain and are getting larger as vehicles scoop out the broken tarmac, as can be clearly seen in the pictures. Paul has previously stated that in situations like this, patching small repairs is pointless as it's short-term fix and it gets gouged out, and that instead the whole section of failed road needs replacing. Clearly this hasn't happened. I'd like to know if Paul is content with this random, expensive, ineffective, poor quality approach to potholes.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. As you've already noticed, I'm afraid Paul isn't here to answer your question, so I'll do my best. Naturally enough, the Councillor's Highways Authority has a duty to keep the highways safe. All our roads are regularly inspected, and we use a risk-based system to identify, prioritise and undertake repairs. This is set out in our Highway Maintenance Management Plan, which was originally introduced in 2019. The Council's maintenance contractor is responsible for ensuring compliance and is also accountable for keeping the highway safe. Defects identified under the risk-based policy which require immediate attention will be attended to. Where these can be repaired permanently in a single visit, the contractor is expected to do just that. Where the contractor is unable to undertake the repair in a single visit, they can plan a permanent repair, but must still ensure any safety defect is made safe regardless. Repairs requiring road closures or more specific traffic management to undertake works will in most cases result in planned works. It's also likely that a temporary repair will be undertaken. In the case of Shefford Crescent, which is what you were referring to, Peter, the contractor identified the need to use three-way traffic signals to undertake the repairs. The work was marked out, ordered and planned. In the meantime, the highway's defects identified were temporarily made safe in accordance with our duty and highway maintenance management plan. And I believe the permanent repairs at Shefford Crescent were carried out under three-way lights on the 2nd of August, which I think was probably some time after you, or some time before perhaps, you submitted your question. Okay.
Mr. Humphreys, do you have a supplementary?
Yes. I mean, I think that really highlights the inefficient way things are done, because they indeed, after my question was submitted, did come back and do some more repairs and repaired the bigger hole, which they ignored at the time. And as could be seen in the ones in Crutchley Sarum, you can see the different colours on the pictures, because they come and randomly repair a couple of holes out of the 2 dozen odd there, and then go away and come back. And it must cost an absolute fortune to do this. So a question I would have liked to ask Paul is, if he'd got Volker Highways to repair his driveway to this standard, would he say, fantastic job, here's a bonus, and I'll give you 10 out of 10 on your website as a review? Your personal opinion will do for now.
Well, I don't think I can certainly speak for Paul, and I think it's probably best if I put you in contact with Paul when he is fit and well again, which I hope will be very soon. But thank you for your supplementary, Peter.
Mr. Meadowcroft, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the Audit Committee's July meeting, Wokingham's new auditor, KPMG, announced that their fee for the present year, 23-24, will be £309,000. This compares with Ernst & Young's fee of £106,000 for the last year. There was not a murmur of challenge from the members of the Audit Committee, and as a Wokingham Borough Council taxpayer, I despair why the tripling of costs went unchallenged. And that figure could go significantly higher, since KPMG reminded the Audit Committee that the audit of Wokingham's last 2 annual accounts had not been completed, in part, according to Ernst & Young, due to delays in receiving crucial responses and paperwork. This is likely to create additional work for KPMG, which Wokingham will have to pay for, because KPMG's fee of £309,000 excludes costs for work on prior years that still needs to be completed. Will the Leader of the Council please explain where at least £203,000 and a further reserve of, say, £50,000 to £100,000 to meet any prior year costs has been found to meet this enormous increase?
Thank you, Philip. I'm hoping I will do, actually. The Public Sector Audit Appointments Limited, PSSA, is the organisation that is responsible for appointing external auditors to all local authorities, as well as setting the fees and ensuring effective management of the contracts with these external audit firms. The local authority is unable to challenge the level of fees or even look for alternative providers if they were unhappy with the one that's been appointed to them. The fees for 22-23 audit, which are due to Ernst & Young, are yet to be confirmed. As part of the arrangements to address the backlog of audits in many local authorities, it is explained that the fees will be revised by the PSAA to reflect the level of work that has actually been undertaken. The detail of how that will be calculated has at this stage not yet been made available by the PSAA. Similarly, we do not know if any additional works will be required as part of the 23-24 audit currently being conducted by KPMG, or whether they will be required to provide additional assurances where earlier audits have not been completed. This has not, at this stage, been detailed or confirmed to us. As the details are released, we will work with KPMG and the PSAA to understand the impacts both financially and what the workload might be. With regard to the general level of fees for 23-24, in September 2023, the PSAA consulted on the proposed fees for 23-24, explaining that they are expected to be a significant increase. While acknowledging the pressure on our finances, they explained that these reflected the latest prices from the audit firms and the level of work required nationally to meet the requirements of the Code of Audit Practice. Wokingham's response to this consultation aligned with the general themes of all responses, including that the level of fee increases was not acceptable. Further funding was required to meet the costs, that the PSAA must hold auditors accountable for the delivery, and increased fees must entail a better service from the firms. The PSAA explained that in their response that one of the reasons for the increases in costs was their dependency on the market to supply the contracts, and this has been incredibly challenging. In fact, they have only received enough interest following several procurement rounds, which clearly
Imogen,
impacted
can you
the
get to the end, please?
Sure. The reflected increase in fees, officers have withdrawn a budget saving from the MTFP expected from the improved controls and quality assurance. We will continue to review the position once there is more certainly aligned challenges being considered to clear the national backlog and reset the external audit arrangements.
I've just been told that people in the public gallery are struggling to hear. Can everybody make sure they speak really loudly and clearly into the microphones? Thank you. Mr. Meadowcroft, do you have a supplementary?
I certainly do. Thank you for answering that question, which I submitted to the Leader of the Council. Ernst & Young have made it clear to Wokingham's Audit Committee they are minded to give not one, but two disclaimed audits, opinions, to the two most recent annual accounts due to insufficient or unreliable information. As you're no doubt aware, a disclaimed audit is the lowest status comment that any auditor can provide. And were Wokingham to receive an unwelcome hat-trick of 3 of them consecutively, then the possibility emerges that Whitehall could then take over from you the running of Wokingham's fiscal and day-to-day affairs. In view of the appalling consequences of Woking Council being taken over by Whitehall, including loss of services, fire sale of assets, huge hikes in council tax, and what immediate steps is this Liberal Democrat-led administration proposing to improve the situation, especially the contested property valuations?
Well, I don't think there's any risk of us turning into a Woking, not at this point in time. I think what you're referring to, I mean, obviously at the moment we don't know what the auditors are going to say to us and what information they're going to need. And until we know that, we can't really answer it. Sorry.
Next is Mr. Alistair Scott, please. Are you there? Are you online?
I am online. Apologies, I couldn't be there in person.
We can hear you now, thank you. Go ahead.
Really quick question then. The continued fortnightly bin collections clearly aren't working. This is due to personal and also associated social media content causing hazard across Wokingham. Associated to this, the one bin per household is woefully inadequate to dispose of fortnightly waste. And will this be reviewed to increase the bin numbers per household?
Thank you very much for your question, Alistair. The Council has been clear throughout the projects that this new system will reduce refuse, increase recycling rates, contribute to the decarbonisation of our local economy and save money that will support the Council's financial position. The Council has made the decision following extensive public consultation that has been well documented. Over 85% of other councils in the country undertake this current methodology, and it is proven to work. One 180-litre bin per household is adequate to contain waste that cannot be recycled for families up to 5 residents, for families with which there is up to 5 residents in the property. Some authorities even provide a smaller 140 refuse bin, 140 litre rather. Through waste composition surveys, it was found that nearly 70% of rubbish being disposed of could have in fact been recycled, and therefore there should be very little in the black wheelie bin. Larger families and households with 2 or more children in nappies and households that produce incontinence waste can apply for additional capacity in the form of a 240-litre bin. Food waste is still being collected weekly, and we have seen to date an increase of 20% compared to last year. A report commissioned by DEFRA stated that there is no evidence that alternative weekly collections will cause any significant health impact for residents, or that any health impacts are likely to be significantly greater than those associated with weekly collections.
Mr. Scott, do you have a supplementary?
I do have a supplementary, which is around what volume of feedback and what methodology will be required for this to be reviewed for this borough.
I'm happy to provide a written statement for that, Alistair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Next is Michael Firmager, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is this. How does Wokingham Borough Council prioritise grass cutting of roadside verges, traffic islands, central reservations and roundabouts, including overhanging bushes on pavements across the borough? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. The majority of council grass areas that are cut the majority of council grass areas are cut 4 times a year following the approved changes to the service implemented in October 2023. These changes enable delivery of financial savings against the grounds maintenance contract. In terms of resolving any issues reactively, we work with our contractors to provide grass cutting for health and safety reasons, which may be undertaken on an ad hoc basis. When prioritising work through our monitoring officers and highways inspectors, we consider road speeds, traffic levels, visibility to road users, footfall, and extent of vegetation growth. Also considered as to the condition of the ground, i.e. if it is sodden, we wouldn't mow that area immediately as to avoid cutting up and dredging up the ground.
Mr. Firmager, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I do with that. Yeah, I'm kind of a bit underwhelmed by that answer, to be perfectly honest, although I'm very happy about the health and safety aspect. But being on something specific, when will the overhanging bushes at Kiln Green on the A4 to the boundary with the Royal Borough, Windsor and Maidenhead be cut back?
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm not aware of this exact issue, and I'm happy to provide a written response. Thank you.
Anne Daly, please.
Thank you. Forgive me for not standing. In the Department of Work and Pensions press release published on the 20th of August 2024, it is estimated that 880,000 households nationally who are eligible to receive pension credit have not yet made a claim. As councillors may be aware, those receiving pension credit are automatically entitled to the winter fuel payment of up to £300. In the Wokingham Borough Council area, policy and practice estimate there are 845 households missing out on pension credit of approximately 2.3 million. That is an average of £2,699 a year per household. Could you please let us know what Wokingham Borough Council are doing to publicise possible entitlement to pension credit amongst our community? And secondly, how you will provide rapid support for residents to enable them to make a claim for pension credit if entitled?
Thank you for raising this question, and this is an incredibly important issue. At a national level, up to 40% of those eligible for pension tax credit don't claim it. Those are pensioners living on very low incomes, normally less than £11,343 a year if you're a single person. As well as the direct benefit, pension credit is a passport to a wide range of other valuable benefits, such as council tax reduction, energy bill discounts, housing benefit, and now winter fuel allowance. WBC and Age UK Berkshire are part of the Hardship Alliance, which has been working to maximise the income incomes of our residents living on the lowest incomes for over 2 years. This includes working to get eligible pensioners onto pension tax credit. The Council stepped up its work to reach eligible pensioners as soon as the Government announced the changes to the winter fuel allowance. You need to have applied for the pension credit by the 21st of December 2024 to get winter fuel allowance for this year, so this work is urgent. I won't have time in this answer to cover everything that the Council is doing, but a few examples: contacting pensioners claiming housing benefit and council tax credit, using our communication channels such as resident newsletters and the Council website, supporting customer-facing staff to advise residents. As a direct result of their efforts, 1,397 residents so far have accessed the Government's pension credit eligibility checker. The Council is also working with our Hardship Alliance and community partners. As a wider community, we can boost each other's work and can often directly contact those who may be harder to reach. Those eligible for pension credit may have challenges in applying. The Council and our partners are offering direct support in a number of ways, for example via the Council's Welfare Service, libraries and Age UK Berkshire. I urge anyone who needs support for themselves or a loved one to claim pension credit to please get in touch. And the Council's dedicated page on the cost of living help for pensioners is a great place to start.
Anne, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much for such a detailed reply and delighted to hear the different ways you're supporting residents. I'm wondering if, in order to achieve this, hopefully all 845 households identified who may need to claim for pension credit, the Council have thought of additional training and encouragement for public-facing staff so they are able to help residents who may be digitally excluded to complete a benefit calculation, which I believe you alluded to, so enabling them to actually reach the full benefit entitlement, not just pension credit.
Yes, Anne, that's absolutely a key consideration at the moment. Now, for the past 2 years, some of the work that we've been doing with the Hardship Alliance has been very much to get into contact, stay in contact with people who may need support. We have been providing training to our customer-facing staff, and I know that you and your organisation, Money Matters, have very kindly given us some support on that. That work continues, and I think it's absolutely critical. Thank you.
For information, the remaining 3 questions were submitted following the publication of the main Council agenda papers and can be found as supplementary agenda item 2. Mr. Andy Croy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The local plan update identifies this building and the associated car parking as a site for 100 flats. This building, this room, is the heart of local government in our borough and a source of considerable civic pride. There's nothing else like it. I do not recall any consultation with either councillors or with residents which concluded that this building should be offloaded to a developer. If the plan passes this evening, future reports on the future of this site will note with glee that council has already approved the use of this site for housing, thus narrowing the opportunities for other options that the council should be pursuing. In February this year, council agreed that in future, cash received from the sale of council assets, such as money received from the sale of Shoot End, could be used to prop up the revenue budget. Is it not true that any councillor who votes for the local plan is effectively assenting to the sale of this building for flats?
Well, first of all, thank you for your question, Andy, and it's very good to see you again. The council is, of course, the landowner in this instance, and back in September 2023, the executive considered and approved the list of sites owned by the council that would be promoted into the local plan for consideration for allocation for development. This included the Shoot End site for residential development of around 100 dwellings. The site was duly promoted into the local plan process for consideration by the local plan team, which is independent of the council as landowner. This independent process has assessed the site and has proposed the site for allocation for residential development within the local plan, which will be considered later this evening. The allocation for residential development within the plan does not commit the council to developing the Shoot End site for residential housing if it should choose to retain the site for council services in the future. It's a very important point, I think. I anticipate that a further decision on our future headquarters provision will be taken by the executive early next year, following further consideration of the outputs of ongoing feasibility work over the next few months, including through the overview and scrutiny process.
Andy, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you very much. So this site will see less than 1% of the total housing requirement will arise as a result of using this site. Now, against that, you've got potentially the millions of pounds in extra cash that the council will get to spend on the revenue budget that would come from the sale of this site. So it's a tiny, almost infinitesimally small fraction of the housing set against the £4 million or so, which is the estimate I saw of revenue we could have. So is the site in the plan because it meets the requirement of 0.7% of the requirement, or is it in the plan because of the cash that might be available to the council?
Thank you, Andy. I fully understand your romantic attachment to the council, and particularly this chamber, where, of course, you have made very many memorable speeches in the past. I, too, it may surprise you to know, am also rather attached and fond of this chamber. But we have been trying to assess whether the council remains based at Shoot End or whether it moves to a different site on the basis of a whole range of considerations. And sentiment is unquestionably one of them, but it has to be put alongside others. And that's how we're trying to assess this in the round, and we will be able to give you a fuller idea of what the future lies, the future for Shoot End lies, in the not too distant future.
Darrell Tott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to rephrase my question because I actually asked the process of submitting a question, and my question was taken verbatim without me being able to correct it. So for the point of clarity, I'll rephrase the question. Figure 6 on page 74 of the local plan has the Barkham Square concept developed by David Locke Associates on behalf of Wokingham Borough Council. Page 842 has a different current concept plan developed by BMD on behalf of Crest Nicholson. The illustrative diagram on page 842 of Barkham Square indicates some provision adjacent to the existing houses on Archer Grove, Barkham Square, which is not present in the council diagram. I have assumed this is local amenities based on SANG's provisions later stated in the plan, and therefore have assumed examples such as allotments. Please can it be confirmed what it is exactly the intended purpose for this provision, and why it is adjacent to existing properties, and why it has not been run parallel to Commonfield Lane to mitigate any security concerns I have around visibility and access to adjacent properties?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Darrell. The illustrative diagram you refer to is not part of the proposed submission plan, but is within the supporting sustainability appraisal. The diagram in this section has been provided by the site promoter, and it's indicative, and I believe it does show allotments. The proposed submission plan sets out policy requirements for the Arborfield Green strategic development location with a high-level concept plan of how development might be laid out, and sets out a range of other policies for managing development. But that word might is a critical one here, I think. Whilst allotments form part of the open space requirements development should provide, there is no prescribed location. And before a planning application is submitted, and this is where this matter will be really determined at planning application stage, before a planning application is submitted, the developer is required to undertake engagement with the local community to help inform their proposal. And through that opportunity, I hope you'll be able to make your views known and I hope your concerns will be addressed. But we will be trying to look very carefully at comments you might want to make in relation to a planning application when and if that arises.
Mr. Tott, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Not only on that provision, but there are other provisions that aren't detailed in the plan. Where specifically within the Barkham plan are the traveller pitches proposed, and why have 5 been proposed? Given that point 9.9.6 of the local plan and policy H9, which is a Wokingham policy, not a national policy, states that proposals for 500 or more dwellings gross will provide 1 traveller pitch per 200 dwellings, rounded to the nearest whole figure, which would equate to only 3 required at Barkham Square development and not the 5 proposed, which are required under the South Wokingham SDL, and are not specifically designated for Barkham Square. So why can't these be accommodated elsewhere, such as on Commonfield Lane sites, which is adjacent to Barkham Square development, where recent additional pitch applications were rejected? For example, last year, 11 were rejected on Bluebell Farm and 5 in adjacent sites, where the rejection comments directly contradict the statements in the local plan. Those 11 sites would cover the full requirement as part of the SDL.
Well, thank you very much for that extremely detailed question, Darryl. It won't entirely surprise you to know I'm not in a position to give you an authoritative answer right now, but I will ensure that you get a written response, which I hope will be able to answer your questions.
Apparently, remote listeners are now struggling to hear the sound. So if everybody can remember, if you're not speaking, please turn off your microphone, and the person speaking, please try and talk as loud as you can. Thank you. Deborah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a dispute over how difficult it is to remove sites that were included in the draft version of the LPU. WBC posted on X and Facebook, we found large-scale development is the most effective way to meet our housing need. That's why we're proposing the same successful approach in our new local plan. With a 3.2-year housing land supply and unplanned developments regularly approved at appeal, this approach does not appear successful. In December 2023, the updated MPPF included provisions stating that small and medium-sized sites can make an important contribution to meeting the housing requirement of an area and are often built out relatively quickly. It asks councils to identify, through the development plan, land to accommodate at least 10% of their housing requirement to sites no larger than 1 hectare. This percentage can be reduced. And to seek policies to support small sites. Sorry, I've lost my place. And small sites, community-led development, self-build and custom-build housing. For this plan, the HELA methodology was changed to effectively exclude the small sites encouraged in Para 70, such as ours in Hurst. How many non-traveller residential sites below 1 hectare are included as positive allocations in the LPU, and how many were removed since earlier drafts? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Deborah. As you say, national planning policy includes reference to the important contribution that small and medium-sized sites can make to meeting housing requirements. As part of this, it advises that local authorities should identify sites of no larger than 1 hectare and seek opportunities to support the development of small sites through its policies. National planning policy also recognises that the supply of large numbers of new homes can often best be achieved through planning for large-scale development, such as new settlements or significant extensions to existing villages and towns. In terms of small sites, case law has clarified that the 10% target relates to the entire land supply, including sites with permission, what can be anticipated, what's referred to as windfall sites, and through specific site allocations. Each year, around 90 dwellings are completed within the borough on schemes involving 9 or fewer dwellings. While not all of these sites are necessarily under 1 hectare, the vast majority will be. This equates to around 12% of the annual housing need using the method set out in national planning guidance. In the proposed submission plan, 11 of 31 proposed allocations are under 1 hectare. Of these 11, 9 are for new housing and 2 for gypsy and traveller accommodation. In addition, one of the proposed new areas within the Arborfield Green strategic development location is less than 1 hectare. Of sites identified in the previous revised growth strategy or second draft plan, 11 sites under 1 hectare are not listed in the proposed submission plan. There are various reasons for this, including the site having subsequently been built out, the withdrawal of the site by the landowner, as well as consideration of constraints and the development strategy.
Deborah, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I only distinguished traveller sites because that's a separate policy, not for any other reason. Sorry, I was a bit rude about the success of your plan. I did just take a look at the self-build and custom-build policy in the 2020 plan compared to this version, and I see that you've taken out... Oh, sorry. You took out a single line about 100 dwellings and a 5%, which I imagine isn't compliant with Para 70. There's also a 2020 topic paper about self and custom build, which doesn't seem to be there, and I imagine is probably being updated. Will you commit to identifying sites through the development plan and supporting self-builders and helping people to build their own homes in the right places? Good luck with the vote.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Your point about self-build is a very well-made one, and it is certainly something we would aspire to be able to deliver, but I will need to give you, I think, a written response so that it can be fuller, because as you can appreciate, you have raised some quite complex and important issues, which I'd like to give you a more authoritative response than I'll be able to do on the hoof. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public questions. Members of the public are very welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but can I please ask that you view the meeting from the public gallery or, if you need to, the overflow area, given that we are full to capacity this evening. Thank you very much. Now we move on to petitions. Sorry?
Yeah, you're welcome to stay.
You can go up there, if there's room. Thank you. Sorry, moving on to petitions. Does anyone wish to submit a petition? No petitions, thank you. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. As I had mentioned at the start of this meeting, given the profile of the local plan update and the significant public interest, I would like to propose that 1.5 hours be allocated to the consideration of this item, and that speaking times permitted for the Executive Member for Housing, Partnerships and the Local Plan and the Leader of the Opposition's nominee be extended to 12 minutes respectively. This requires a motion to suspend Council Procedure 4221, Timing and Order of Business, and Council Procedure Rule 4213.4, Content and Length of Speeches. Before I propose this motion, I would ask that everyone notes that in addition to the main agenda papers, there are 4 supplementary papers that relate to this item. Copy of all papers are available in the meeting rooms and have been published on the Council's website. Do I have a seconder for this proposal?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Abstentions? Those against? Thank you very much. Motion is carried. I understand that Stephen Conway is proposing this report. Is that correct?
It is, Mr. Mayor. Would you like me to do that now?
Is there a seconder? Thank you, Prue. Stephen, would you like to speak to the report now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Drawing up a local plan is an immensely complex and time-consuming process. In Wokingham's case, it's been very time-consuming, but mainly for reasons beyond our control. The previous administration faced a fundamental objection from the Ministry of Defence to its first draft plan. In response, it withdrew Graiseley Garden Town proposal and replaced it with the Loddon Valley Hall Farm strategic development in its second draft plan. The current administration, formed in May 2022, faced a further delay when the last government offered, and then nearly a year later refused, to allow past over-delivery to be deducted from the housing figures required to be delivered in this new local plan. If approved this evening, the new local plan will be subject to a final consultation and then go on to the government-appointed inspector who will decide on its soundness for adoption. It falls to me, as the current executive member for planning and the local plan, to present the work for which others should be credited. I want first and foremost to thank the council officers in the planning department and other areas of the organisation for their dedicated efforts over many years. They undertook the painstaking technical assessments and evidence gathering for the sites selected and the policies proposed. We are lucky in Wokingham to have such high quality officers, and it has been a pleasure and a privilege to work with them. I want also to thank my predecessors as executive members, most recently Lindsay Ferris, and in the previous administration, Wayne Smith. Wayne laid the foundations for the current plan in the previous administration's second draft, which identified the vast majority of the sites for new housing, including the principal site of Loddon Valley Hall Farm. The plan before you is truly the fruit of work by two different administrations, and I hope councillors will approach it in that spirit rather than indulge in party political point scoring. The new local plan improves, where possible, on the draft we inherited. Rook's Nest Farm is no longer included for housing. We could withdraw it because the council is the owner. Draft plan sites in private hands can safely be withdrawn only with the landowner's acquiescence, or if circumstances materially change to make them less suitable,
yes, Peter?
Or if a demonstrably better site of equal capacity can be delivered at least as quickly.
Hold on, Stephen, please. Peter?
4-2-13-16 to get a factual answer from an officer. Question is, does it require the permission of the landowner to have a site removed from the plan when it's at Reg 18? My understanding is that's not accurate.
And that is actually not what I said, so I would like to rise on a point of personal explanation.
Please go ahead, Stephen.
What I actually said, and I hope this is injury time and it's not a tactic to disrupt the flow of my speech, what I actually said was that draft plan sites in private hands can safely be withdrawn only with the landowner's acquiescence, or if circumstances materially change to make them less suitable, or if a demonstrably better site of equal capacity can be delivered at least as quickly. Those words have been checked for accuracy by our planning team. May I continue, Mr. Mayor?
Please continue.
Thank you. We then worked, when we formed the new administration in May 2022, we began a review of Loddon Valley Hall Farm, the principal site in the draft, and other promoted major sites, reassessing each in relation to national and local planning policies and technical appraisals undertaken by council officers. On those planning grounds, Loddon Valley Hall Farm proved to be the best of the major sites promoted to the council by landowners. We then worked with the principal landowner to produce a scheme which I hope councillors will find more acceptable than the draft version. Loddon Valley Hall Farm now has fewer dwellings, but still delivers a new secondary school, primary schools, affordable housing, and other infrastructure we require. Contrary to what many of us feared, it will not increase flood risk. It should indeed reduce it. And it makes possible the creation of a large new country park for the enjoyment of local communities. There are also borough-wide benefits. The plan now includes bold new policies on energy efficiency in new homes and commercial buildings. It increases the affordable housing contribution required on bigger new sites from the current 35% to 40%. We will require affordable housing contribution on all developments of 5 or more dwellings rather than the 10 stipulated in national policy. This approach demonstrates the council's commitment, which I hope is cross-party, to provide homes for those for whom market housing is out of reach. The new plan also designates more than 100 local green spaces, which have a level of protection analogous to the green belt in the countryside. And it identifies 13 larger areas of valued landscapes where any development must respect local special features and characteristics. All local plans involve difficult choices. I can understand why residents near proposed major developments are dismayed. I wish we could devise a local plan that upset no one, but unfortunately, that is not possible. My hope is that once the decision is made, the uncertainty will end and affected residents will work with the council to make the development as good as it can be. We all across this chamber recognise and sympathise with the concerns of those who oppose development. But councillors must also be mindful of the interests of those who struggle in an area of high prices and high rents to find a place of their own. We need much more affordable housing to meet local need. And the only way we currently can add affordable housing at scale is through market housing developments. I ask all councillors to recognise our collective responsibility to protect the borough from inappropriate, unplanned, speculative development, which almost always comes with less infrastructure than planned development. Since February 2022, the council has not been able to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, leaving us exposed to speculative applications that we might refuse locally, but which can be won at appeal because the amount of land with planning permission is running out. True, in our case, some appeal inspectors have softened the impact of the lack of a 5-year land supply in recognition of past over-delivery. But we cannot rely on that softening continuing. Indeed, we can anticipate its ending very soon. We can stop the borough's exposure to inappropriate speculative development only by agreeing a new local plan. The sooner we agree it, the sooner we benefit from the protections and benefits it affords. You will be aware that the new government is proposing significant changes to the planning system. An important part of the government's approach is increased housing numbers. Wokingham is currently required to ensure the delivery of 748 new homes per year. Under the proposed changes, that goes up to 1,308 a year. but ministers have recognised that transitional arrangements are necessary to help those councils with a plan at a very advanced stage to adopt it speedily under the current rules rather than begin afresh under the new rules. These transitional arrangements allow us to continue with the existing numbers if we get a local plan to inspector's examination, submit it for inspector's examination no more than a month after the government announces its final decision on changes to the planning system. From what the government has told us, that means mid to late January. If council does not approve the plan this evening, there will be insufficient time to meet the January deadline. If we miss the deadline, we must immediately begin work on drawing up another plan that accommodates the higher numbers. We would have to go back to the beginning again during that period, and that period would be several years required to prepare a new higher housing numbers plan. And during that period of several years, we would have no 5-year land supply. We would continue to be exposed to the full effect of speculative development across the borough for this extended period, and in most cases, be powerless to stop it. On the other hand, if we approve the plan before you this evening, we will be on the path to a return to the protection of a 5-year land supply in the near future. We will then have several years breathing space to prepare a further plan in line with the new rules, protected from those speculative developments we judge to be inappropriate by the shield of an up-to-date plan. I understand why residents living near development sites allocated in the new local plan hope that delay might save them from unwelcome new building by bringing alternative sites into play. But delaying the local plan before us this evening will not save any site that the plan allocates. A replacement plan would have to include all those sites and many others currently excluded if it were to meet the government's new higher housing allocation. And as noted already, if the plan we are considering is rejected, then for the prolonged period of the preparation of an alternative, higher numbers local plan, the whole borough would be exposed to speculative development, including the sites identified in the plan before you now. Speculative applications, won on appeal to remind you, usually deliver less infrastructure than sites processed through a local plan. We would, in all likelihood, end up with many more homes, but with less infrastructure to support them. I hope even opponents of the new local plan will therefore recognise that delay would be a disastrous mistake. The responsible course, which provides us with the best chance to protect the borough from prolonged and intense exposure to speculative development, is to approve the new local plan this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Before we proceed to... Oh, sorry. Thank you, Stephen. Does the seconder wish to speak right now or reserve your right?
I will reserve my right, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before we proceed to the debate on this item, I would like to invite the Leader of the Opposition or a nominee to speak. Pauline, you or your nominee have 12 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, beforehand, I would like to propose an amendment to the item. I believe Priya's got the copies to circulate to councillors.
Yeah, have you got a seconder for that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to be seconding this amendment.
Thank you. Stephen?
I have to say I'm rather disappointed that the opposition have chosen to table an amendment without informing us in advance on a matter of such importance as this. And I would like to remind them that if their amendment causes delay, it will effectively negate the motion.
Hold on, Stephen. Peter?
In what part of the Constitution is the Leader of the Council allowed to make statements when a motion of amendment has been proposed? Please, if you could enforce the Constitution, Mr. Mayor.
We agree with you, Peter. So the amendment process, please. Okay, we will have a... So we will have a short adjournment of 5 minutes while the amendment is distributed. Okay, thank you. 5 minutes' time. I don't think the public want to see us chatting. Can we get on? Thank you. First of all, I want to say that this amendment has been reviewed and it is a legitimate amendment. As part of the process, I have to read it out. The amendment proposes that, first point, the Loddon Valley Garden Village strategic development location and the Barkham Square extension of the Arborfield Green strategic development location are removed from the Wokingham Borough Local Plan Update 2023-2040 proposed submission plan to the effect that this item will not allocate any proposed development to the sites above. Secondly, defer items 36 so that the above changes can be put to officers who will also seek to make a case based on A, the NPPF's requirement to establish exceptional circumstances in order to justify a lower housing requirement figure, B, and or through seeking more brownfield sites via methods such as targeting underutilised commercial and industrial sites that could be allocated to residential to make up the shortfall. C, so that the motion as amended can be recommended as legally compliant and sound. And thirdly, said deferral be limited to 2 weeks and an extraordinary meeting of the council is called so that the alternative proposals can be considered by members. Joseph, you have 3 minutes to talk to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This plan is illogical, missing evidence and disproportionate. Rushing through such a major proposal with such limited time for due diligence has far-reaching consequences. The Loddon Valley Garden Village SDL and the Barkham Square extension of the Arborfield Green SDL realise these consequences through their direct threat of forever changing the character and way of life that attracts people to make Barkham and Arborfield their home. These proposals don't just break the promises made to residents by the administration, they are the personification of disproportionate and unsustainable development in Wokingham. Barkham and Arborfield and its surroundings do not have the road infrastructure to accommodate a development of the scale that Hall Farm proposes. Its considerable distance from any train station or even any major settlement shows that the LPU's claims that Hall Farm can accommodate not just sustainable, but any methods of transport are vastly overstated. At Barkham Square, Barkham Road already cannot keep up with demand. 600 more houses will only deepen this problem. And for education, the Bohunt sixth form provision will be largely swallowed up by existing demand in Arborfield Green. With no further provisions for Barkham Square, this will only deepen secondary school capacity issues. And any justification for such a limited provision is absent from this plan. Healthcare and retail services are already of high demand, but limited supply too. Arborfield Green's community hub raises concerns for service provision at Hall Farm as well. As a consequence of numerous Section 106 agreement violations that the council have effectively ignored, it's put residents like myself in a position where I have to go to Finchampstead for the doctor, Yateley for the supermarket, Wokingham for a meal, and Winnish for work. There is a clear trend of travel outside the ward in order to access essential services. As the past has shown, we cannot rely on enforcement. If Hall Farm was left with inadequate service provision for the better part of a decade, the strain on local infrastructure and services in surrounding communities will be too great to bear. A straw would break the camel's back, but Barkham Square and Hall Farm are more like lead weights. The conflicting arguments for why and why not certain proposals are acceptable are also a cause for concern. Ashridge and the land east of Twyford were rejected as a reasonable growth scenario on the basis that they were too close to each other. But the LVGV SDL and the Barkham Square extension of the Arborfield Green SDL are far closer in distance. Hall Farm promotes development in flood zone 2 and 3 areas. The ward will experience a significant loss of both B&V agricultural land and biodiversity. Strategic gaps would be drastically reduced and Langley Commons identity would cease to exist. These arguments were used to justify the exclusion of other sites, but the extent to which said arguments were equitably weighted is far from just. We can all see that this plan, in its current form, will ultimately do far more harm than good. It needs a rethink. So if you're keen to support common sense, equitable distribution, accessible services, and a sustainable vision for our entire borough, I plead, no matter whether you sit here, there, or there, support this amendment tonight, not just to save Barkham and Arborfield, but to save Wokingham from unsustainable development.
Stephen, do you accept the amendment?
Surprisingly, no.
Okay, so since the amendment has been rejected, does any member wish to speak to the amendment?
I would like to speak to the amendment as
sorry, show of hands would be great, sorry. Thank you. Just 2 people. Rebecca as well. Yeah, keep your hands up, sorry. Nobody else? That's it. Okay. So let's start with George.
Mr. Mayor, I will reserve my right a second until others have spoken, please.
Then it will be, Rachel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep this really brief. We can't vote in favour of something that's just been sprung on us in this way at the last minute. If the Tories were serious about this, you would have talked to us, surely, in advance, so we could understand exactly what you were trying to get across here. You know, this is not a game, okay? We would have expected more from you. We can't support something sprung on us in this way without, you know, proper understanding of the implications of this and indeed its very viability as a proposition.
Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I completely understand the perspective of the proposer and seconder. They are, as I can quite clearly see, trying to defend their ward. And that's something I respect and admire. But I have to say that the opposition in proposing this amendment seem to be displaying a wish to distance themselves from their own draft plan that allocated the vast majority of these sites. I also have to say that although Joseph hinted at an alternative site that he would like to see in the plan, there's no firm proposal here of an alternative for the sites you propose to withdraw. I don't like to say this, but I'm afraid this amendment could only have been proposed by councillors who have a limited awareness of how the planning system works. And I say that because it is utterly, utterly unrealistic to assume that our officers can undertake the amount of work you're requiring them to do in 2 weeks. That is ludicrous. Do you not realise how long it has taken to compile all of the technical data required to support the current plan? How much work is involved in that? And I have to say, some of the comments at the beginning of Joseph's proposing of this motion were very unfortunate. I wish he had not said what he said, which was a slur on the very hard work undertaken by our officers to produce a
Point of personal
valid
explanation,
plan.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, please, Joseph.
My comments at the start were not a slur on the officers' work on this local plan. I know they have worked absolutely tirelessly on this. The reason I think that this plan is illogical, missing evidence and disproportionate is through the fact that there are much evidence. For example, I point to the bow hunt sick form provision. The evidence, that's something that thankfully through lots of meetings was very helpful officers we were able to retain. It's disproportionate through the fact that the south of the borough is, and especially Barkham and Arborfield, is littered with developments, and it's illogical through the fact that it ultimately is going to do far more harm than good to the entirety of the borough, not just necessarily the south. It's, I must say, not a disdain on the officers' work, but it's more the result of what it says. That is what I'm against tonight.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. I'm very pleased that you have made it abundantly clear you're not criticising our officers, who I will defend staunchly because they have worked incredibly hard on this plan before you, and you are unrealistically expecting that they can deliver what you're asking for here in 2 weeks. That really is totally unrealistic. And I have to say, in your point about the distribution of development across the borough, I quite completely understand why people in the south of the borough feel as they do. But can I remind you that when we're drawing up a local plan, it's not about equal geographical distribution across the borough. It's about site availability, site suitability, and site deliverability. Those are the key issues. And our officers work very hard to assess every site promoted to us on sound planning grounds. I'm afraid what you're proposing here is not sound planning grounds. It's, I'm afraid, a politically motivated attempt to remove sites without offering us any viable alternative. And I'm afraid we must, as a council, vote this amendment down. If we do not...
Stephen, that's 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be very grateful for some guidance on whether if I speak now on the amendment, I can also second the motion later on.
Can we... Yes, so you can speak on the amendment now and the motion later on.
Thank you very much. That's what I understood, but I think it's as well to clarify that in advance. I think I agree totally with what the leader of the Labour group said. If this was a serious attempt to do something to the local plan, springing it on us on the night is just ridiculous, I have to say. I do appreciate that both Joseph and George are defending their own ward. And that, you know, okay, that's jolly good. But what they are proposing is to remove the largest site we've got, in particular, and another large site, which have been assessed on technical planning grounds for inclusion in the plan, to remove them for reasons other than planning considerations. And if we did that, there would be a very large risk that our plan would be assessed as being unsound because it has not been prepared in accordance with the right process. The points which they say we could look at the NPPF requirement to establish exceptional circumstances, we have already explored the NPPF's ability to claim exceptional circumstances and have obtained legal advice from experts which say that we do not have any exceptional circumstances. As for brownfield replacements, that assessment has already been carried out and has only discovered 933 capacity, which is nowhere near enough to replace this, and there is nowhere else to look. Stephen has talked about the 2 weeks, which is a ridiculous amount of time to do the kind of technical assessment that's required, but also would introduce 2 weeks delay. We are already on the brink with this. We have 6 weeks of consultation, I believe. Some planning officers are nodding at me, that is the right length of time, for assessing the soundness of the plan before it has to be submitted to the planning inspector. And that 6 weeks we have to then assess the results of that consultation. And we have to do all that by January or mid-January at the worst. It's not achievable. 2 weeks delay will derail the whole thing. We cannot possibly vote for this.
Georgia, as the second of the amendment, please speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight I'm speaking in strong support of this important amendment, one that gives us the opportunity to fulfil promises made to our residents. I want to start by saying it's a bit rich coming from the Lib Dem leader of the council, Councillor Conway, to hint at NIMBYism when he was recently opposing a couple of hundred homes in his own ward but wants to put 4,500 houses in Barkham and Arborfield. This is just hypocrisy. For several election cycles, the Liberal Democrats have campaigned against the inclusion of Loddon Valley Garden Village, currently known as Hall Farm, and Barkham Square in the local plan update. Yet now they control this council. We see no action to remove these sites from the plan. Indeed, both of these sites are in their plan that they have presented us with almost 4,000 houses and 600 houses respectively. Tonight we have the chance to act where they have not. Residents have been protesting outside this chamber, and now they're watching us from the public gallery, watching and waiting for us to deliver on the commitments made to them. They need to trust that when they vote for a candidate or a party, we will do what we said we would. If we fail to follow on these promises, we will risk losing the trust and engagement of our communities. We, the Conservatives, at the most recent local election, made it clear that we would remove Hall Farm from the local plan, and that is exactly what this amendment does. Our pledge was clear. We would fight against unsustainable development at Hall Farm, and this amendment is our opportunity to fulfil that commitment. We do need new homes, but they must be provided in a sustainable and thoughtful manner, and what we cannot afford to do is repeat the mistakes made at Arbfield Green, where residents are still facing delays in the provision of facilities nearly a decade after the development began and legal obligation deadlines have passed. Despite promises made about local services, residents of Arbfield Green continue to rely on neighbouring areas for essential services like healthcare and retail. It's important to recognise that while changing the local plan at this stage may be difficult, it is not impossible, nor is it a reason to shy away from doing what is right. We were elected to make tough decisions, and our duty is to act in the best interest of our residents, not just to follow the path of least resistance. This amendment is not about opposing development for the sake of it. It's about ensuring that growth in Wokingham happens in a way that is fair, justified and sustainable, both for the borough and those who live here. We cannot simply push ahead with flawed proposals because changing them seems difficult. We must be willing to make the necessary changes, even when they are challenging. By supporting this amendment, we honour the promises we made to our residents. We can ensure that the local plan is one that serves the needs of our community without compromising the character of our borough. I urge all councillors to vote for this amendment and demonstrate that we listen to our residents, that we act on their concerns and we keep our word. And one other point, you say that we haven't given you any time. I want to remind everyone that we got this 1,500-page document 7 days ago. So we're saying 2 weeks to go through this. So it's a bit rich about that one as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we move to the vote on the amendment. We need 6 people to indicate that. Yeah, okay, that's fine. We will do a recorded vote.
So please say for, against or abstention on the amendment. Councillor Alawat.
Microphone.
No, 4. Sorry.
Councillor Ainsley.
Against.
For.
Councillor Alder.
Against.
Councillor Alvey.
Against.
Councillor Andrea.
Against.
Councillor Ashwell.
Against.
For.
Councillor Bell.
Abstain.
Councillor Bellow.
Abstention.
Councillor Betteridge.
Against.
Against.
Councillor Bray.
Against.
Councillor Bruno Walker.
Against.
Councillor Burgess.
Abstain.
Councillor Comer.
Against.
Councillor Conway.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Councillor Evans.
4.
Councillor Fishwick. Councillor Freeney.
Abstain.
Councillor Gilder.
For.
Councillor Glover.
Against.
Councillor Gray.
Abstain.
Councillor Harding.
Against.
Councillor Hare.
Against.
Councillor Harper.
4.
Councillor Inyan-Gumvana.
4.
Councillor Jewell.
Against.
Councillor De Jong.
Against.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Charles Magetts.
For.
Councillor Rebecca Margetts.
For.
Councillor Mather.
Against.
Councillor Montgomery.
Against.
Councillor Nagala.
Abstain.
Councillor Nagra.
Abstain.
Councillor Newton.
Against.
Councillor MCO Hong.
Against.
Councillor Rowland.
Against.
Councillor Solomon.
For.
Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
Against.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
Against.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
Against.
Councillor Swin Fazan.
Yeah, you're good. For.
Councillor Swaddle.
For.
Councillor Timlin.
Against.
Councillor Turtle.
For.
Councillor Wayhill.
Abstain.
Councillor Eunice.
For.
The amendment falls. So we go back to the original point in the debate. So this is for Pauline or her nominee to speak for 12 minutes. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This plan is more than 2 years late. The Liberal Democrat administration got themselves elected on the back of a promise to bring in a new local plan and save the borough from excessive development. Instead, they've spent the last 2 years avoiding the subject and have pushed us right against the buffers as far as agreeing a plan is concerned. Then we had the farce in the last council meeting in which the leader of the council tried to claim that everything the administration had said, after going on 28 months of sitting around, that only now that they discovered that they couldn't amend the draft local plan. Fortuitously, the Liberal Democrats came to this realisation after all-out elections on the new boundaries, waited another 2 years before residents could give their response at the ballot box. The issue with these various claims is that officers confirmed before the meeting that the plan could be amended and that written legal advice didn't exist, and have since confirmed that sites can be removed from the plan without the permission of site promoters. This local plan is littered with broken promises made by the Liberal Democrats to the people of this borough. The paper commits the council to building houses in numbers that were opposed by the Liberal Democrat ruling group when they stood for election, and were often core platforms in their successful campaigns to be elected. Mark Brunel Walker started a petition in Wokingham Without against 830 new houses. Will he be voting tonight for 1,100? A leaflet put out on behalf of Jordan Montgomery in May 22 said the Liberal Democrats are opposing plans for major development in the countryside around Wokingham Without and Finchampstead, which they believe to be unsustainable. How will he vote tonight? 3,900 houses in Hall Farm, which the previous Liberal Democrat leader was front and centre of the campaign to oppose, and which cannot all be built in the plan period, are now being proposed. And as much as they try and duck and dive from responsibility, be under no illusion this is their plan. As recently as February, the Lib Dem leaflet in Hillside said, under a headline of Your Lib Dem Council is, setting out our plans for house building and development to replace the local plan that expires in 2026. And in September 22, the leader of Wokingham Borough Council, now Lib Dem MP, said in this chamber, decisions on the sites to be included in the new local plan will be made by councillors, demonstrating that at that time, he, and presumably along with that his executive, believed it was possible for councillors to change the sites in the plan, and that they would be doing that. Before I go on to what we oppose, let's look at some good in this plan. There are undoubtedly some things that we can support. Top of this list absolutely has to be the commitment to protect the green belt and urban green spaces such as Swallows Meadow and Area DD. These are fundamental non-negotiables for us, and I know that my Conservatives colleagues here tonight agree. There must be a united front from this council that green belts should be protected a message we should send to both developers and the new Labour government, and I hope that we'll hear the same sentiments echoed by Labour councillors tonight. I'm pleased to see the route for the Third Thames Bridge is being protected, although I'm concerned the route would mean a lot of traffic going through early, and I believe it would be better connected to the end of the A329. It's also fantastic to see a commitment to physical segregation of new cycleways and providing safe and secure cycle storage, and we fully support the provision of more affordable housing. All these issues are ones that I have been working on for years, both as executive member and as a backbencher. That's the good. There are lots of bad points. Before we can even get into the substance of the sites, we have to address the completely undemocratic way in which the Liberal Democrat administration has approached this plan. Just over a week ago, we were given this monstrosity, and that's only a third of it. Not even all together, but some of us got them, and we were expected to share with others because it all hadn't been printed when the agenda was supposed to come out. And as though the administration somehow didn't know this meeting was coming and didn't have time to prepare for it. We've been given a week to read, digest, and more importantly, understand more than 1,600 pages of complex planning policy documents. We don't do this with the budget. We didn't do it with the much smaller local transport plan, and yet this document that will impact the borough and our residents for decades to come has been bounced on us. So much for notice. This is fundamentally undemocratic, and this timing was driven by the Lib Dem group. In our best attempt to prepare for this meeting, Conservative councillors have posed questions to officers, and I'm very grateful for the hard work of officers and the time they spared us this week. It really was extremely helpful. Nevertheless, even today, many of those questions haven't been fully answered, but we're expected to vote nonetheless. We have little clarity on what the plans actually commit the authority to, what is binding and what is merely indicative. Crucial transport documents showing mitigations haven't been released, and I believe won't be available until next week. Worst of all, the publication of the draft plan on the same day as the agenda meant that many residents will not have realised it was possible to ask a question. And those that did had only 5 days to understand the plan, recognise it had been published, read it, wrap their heads around it and submit a question. It's amazing that 3 people managed to get questions on the agenda at all, even if one of them is a former councillor. Turning to the sites. We've serious concern about the impact on existing residents and traffic levels of developments at Barkham Square, Arborfield, Woking Without and Hall Farm. The plan goes to great lengths to pretend all that will be well, employment will be within the areas developed and transport will be sustainable. It ignores the fact that Hall Farm, or should I call it Loddon Valley Garden Village, will tip all its traffic from nearly 4,000 houses onto existing roads such as Lower Early Way, Mill Lane or Mole Road. There are vague promises of road improvements, but some are not costed and all are not clear. The Hall Park Farm development in particular, as set out in these plans, will never be sustainable. It has poor public transport links, is miles from the nearest station, and it's telling that the sustainable transport page talks about sponsoring improved links from Reading, such as the Heathrow rail link, but is largely silent about how people are intended to get to Reading. As we know, many of these new residents will be commuting towards London and will naturally head for the M4 due to the lack of rail services. It's also noticeable that the only part of the borough connected to London via the new Elizabeth line has very little planned development. Finally, we come to the elephant in the room, the Labour government's housing targets. Labour are proposing almost double our housing target in Wokingham Borough to an eye-watering 1,308 houses per year. At the same time, they've mysteriously decided to reduce the targets for London and other major cities where the gap between house prices and incomes are much higher and when the shortage of houses is acute. I'm sure this has got nothing to do with the number of Labour cabinet ministers who happen to have their constituencies in these cities. I have seen no evidence that building more houses reduces prices. In fact, this paper somewhere says as much. The whole basis of the Labour government policy is that more house building will increase affordability, and that's how they've justified the increased targets. It makes no sense when they're decreasing the targets in London and other cities. It also makes no sense to continue to cram more people into the overheated southeast. Instead, the government should be spreading economic growth to other areas of the country. However, that's government policy, and we've got to live with it, at least for the next 5 years. As a result, the minute the ink is dry on this plan, and 700,000 or more has been spent on the adoption process, the council will have to start again with a different plan to cope with the increased targets. Nothing I've seen in these papers, and nothing I've heard from the leader, compels me to support this local plan. Unless I hear extremely convincing arguments and alternatives, I will vote against this proposal. Like dodgy estate agents, Liberal Democrats repeatedly missold to residents a vision of a brand new plan for housing to get you to buy their party at election time. Turns out there are many additional clauses in small print, and the final product wasn't what was promised on the leaflet. The previous leader even ran off chasing promotion as soon as he got residents to sign on the dotted line. The proposal that stands before us on foundations that are rotten. It builds on 2 years of doing nothing, which has pushed us to make decisions without proper consideration of alternatives, without proper decisions, and without proper understanding of the issues driven by these proposals. It's built on false premise that sites can't be changed. It's built on a rush to outpace Labour's housing targets. It's built on wishful thinking and vague promises about transport and infrastructure. And worst of all, it's built on cynicism, the cynicism of making promises, holding up progress to get Liberal Democrats through local and general elections, and then admitting you actually can't, and we're never going to get what they sold you.
Thank you, Pauline. We now move to debate of this item. Members, please indicate by holding your hand up high, please, for a long time, if you would like to speak on this item. And when I've got the list, I will start. I think we've got the list now, so you can put your hands down, thank you. So according to my list, David Hare first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want quickly to mention why it's so important to get this plan adopted at this meeting. We all know there's a live government consultation on changes to national planning policy, which ends very soon. One of the key proposals in this is that the government are looking to increase the number of homes that each local authority must have in their local plan. The key part for us is that our local plan is looking at meeting the figure of 748 homes a year. If the consultation proposals are finalised by the government as expected, the figure for Wokingham Borough would increase to over 1,300 homes per year. This would be a very significant shift in terms of the number of homes we would need to plan for through the local plan. No one really knows quite what these proposals will look like or time constraints, but one of the reasons that we are keen to push ahead with the local plan is that if we submit the plan to the Secretary of State within a month after the new MPPF is published, we hope to have a stay of execution with the new figures. That means our plan would be examined under the existing policy framework, and that's 748 houses rather than the very much higher figure of 1,308 houses, which the government is currently consulting on. If we approve the new local plan this evening, we can prepare a further local plan to meet the government's new housing targets under the cover of this new plan, which will protect us from inappropriate speculative development. The alternative, refusing to support the local plan we are now considering, we'll be having to prepare a new higher numbers plan without the protection of an up-to-date plan. The whole borough, as Stephen has said so well, will be horribly exposed to inappropriate speculative development with inadequate infrastructure.
Andrew Gray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to speak today on this issue to highlight why this local plan will be damaging for the residents of Shinfield and set our community back further over the next 15 years or so. My ward of Shinfield has seen a lot of new development in recent years, and many families have benefited from the housing and becoming part of the thriving community of Shinfield. But sadly, while existing development continues, infrastructure is struggling to keep pace, and residents are seeing the strains in the system, particularly with roads, education, and healthcare. There are not enough primary school places, and secondary school and sixth form places are not provided in line and with demand in the area. The balance of suitable infrastructure and housing has not yet been achieved with the current developments in Shinfield, and further development in the nearby Loddon Garden Village will only exacerbate this. The plans for a new secondary school in the Loddon Garden Village are welcome, but with delivery not proposed until 2037, there's going to be a long period of time where pressure on school places will get worse before it gets better, with Shinfield residents being pushed further to the back of the queue for secondary school places and for sixth form places, of which there is currently no provision in the local area. The delays in the provision of Bohunt sixth form give further cause for scepticism about the reliability and timeliness of the delivery of a sixth form in Loddon Garden Village, which does not give a clear delivery date for the sixth form in the plan, an area which is of real concern for residents. Shinfield has been described before as a victim of its geography when attempting to deal with the challenge of school places and school transport. This local plan solidifies that position by imposing more development in an area before existing infrastructure is adequate. I am acutely aware of the need for new and affordable housing to meet the needs of our growing communities, but I feel that this needs to be distributed across the borough to strengthen existing communities rather than weakening them. And it's for this reason that I cannot vote for this local plan.
Peter Harper, please.
Mr. Mayor, many of my colleagues feel that we are being bounced into approving this item as a result of the Lib Dem failure to progress this local plan update. We are being told that if we don't approve this item, or if you make significant changes to the sites within the update, we will have to return to Regulation 18 consultation, which will result in the plan having to accommodate the 1,300 plus houses per year forced upon us by the Labour government, instead of the 748 we are currently planning for. This will also open the door to even more planning approval by appeal, which is the result of the lack of a 5-year land supply. This setback is a direct result of the dither and delay by the current and former Lib Dem leaders of the council. In the July 2023 local development scheme, which details the steps to deliver the local plan update, the target was to submit the update in spring this year. We are now looking at a year's delay. The Regulation 18 consultation was completed over 2 years ago. What have they been doing since then? It's not as if there have been dramatic changes to the plan to justify this delay. The Hall Farm site, which the former leader campaigned vociferously against, is still there. Rook's Nest Farm is still built over, although with schools and not houses, despite the assurances from the former Lib Dem councillor for Finchampstead North. The South Wokingham SDL has increased in size, despite Councillor Brunel Walker saying he would vote for the Lib Dems in 2023 because he doesn't trust the Conservatives in Wokingham to protect our ward from development. Will he be voting against this plan to back up his words with action? I have no doubt the Lib Dems will attempt to blame the previous government for this delay. Indeed they have. Just like they blamed SSE for the delay to the solar farm, the last Conservative council for the debacle at California Crossroads, and the Bohunt Trust for the delays to the sixth form. This local plan update is a Lib Dem plan and the delay is a direct result of their failure to deliver. The residents of Wokingham will remember whose plan this is at the next election.
Adrian Betteridge, please.
Thank you. The new combined ward of Barkham and Arborfield is the ward most impacted by this plan. I voted against the amendment tonight, not because I don't wish to stand up for my residents, but because the amendment was irresponsible. It was against things without credible alternatives, and it would benefit nobody, not even the residents of Barkham and Arborfield. Residents in the ward are not in general against new housing, but they do have reasonable concerns about the impact of development on their services, their ability to travel, and the surrounding green space. I've read everything in this plan back to the 2018 assessment of sites, and I thank officers for taking me through all the detail relating to the sites in Barkham and Arborfield. The sustainability appraisal says the choice between the different options for growth is finely balanced. No option is ideal on all or even most of the criteria, but the most sustainable solution is recommended, broadly the same solution recommended in 2021. It also describes the compromises and the actions needed for the plan to be sustainable, and I'll highlight just two of these. Even with improvements, reliance on travel by private cars risks overwhelming the road network. We must make it easy and attractive to travel by other means, and schools, local shops and community centres must be within walking distance for most people. The plan makes this clear, and we must make sure it's delivered. We need local GPs and dentists within the community, and whilst this plan cannot promise that, we must call for government to make this capacity available for local accessible primary care to match the growth in housing. This is already an issue in the ward. Arborfield Green is still in transition, but is becoming a thriving community, and with our help, it will be wonderful. We must work hard on the remaining issues there and learn from the experience to ensure future developments become equally successful without the same delays. I'm a realist. Our housing target is no longer negotiable. We need a local plan if we're to build in sustainable locations with the right infrastructure and protect future green space. And we need a plan now to give us time to accommodate future targets with protection against speculative development whilst we do so. Councillors may not agree on how and why we got here, but that's not the issue before us tonight. Voting against this plan would not be in anyone's interests. I believe elected members and officers under both administrations made sound and evidence-based decisions, and we are now recommending the most sustainable solution. I will vote for the motion, not without some misgivings, but because it's the right thing to do tonight.
Sarah Bell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Today, or this evening, I express my concerns regarding the current local plan, particularly the impact of the Loddon Garden Village development on our ward of Shinfield. Shinfield's been mine and my family's home for the last 6 years, and during that time, our ward has welcomed many new residents, enriching our community further. So I find myself heavily conflicted. I understand the amount of work that's gone in, the benefits and protection of having a local plan, alongside the need to provide housing now and for future generations. However, it is crucial that we strike the right balance between development and sustainability. Despite our growth, we've not received sufficient investment in our infrastructure and public services from the council and other authorities. Further development here, if not carefully managed and planned for, risk long-lasting and detrimental effects on our community. The proposed development will lead to a significant increase in population. Our roads are often congested, particularly in areas connecting residents with commuter links. Public transport is insufficient, and the strain on local healthcare is widely felt. Adding thousands of new homes without a substantial and well-thought-out plan for infrastructure upgrades will only exacerbate these problems. Most notably, our schools are already struggling with capacity and the ability to meet the needs of local children. Many of our children travel to Wokingham and Arborfield to receive their education. That opportunity diminishes with every new development that is built in between our ward and those facilities. This development will bring an influx of families sooner than it can deliver the education to support them, and arguably, just as important, level up the provision so that Shinfield no longer feels like the poorer relative to the rest of the borough. As a community, we cannot afford to allow our children in Shinfield to be marginalised further. So, in conclusion, I urge the Council to consider the impact of this local plan. It is essential that we focus not only on building homes, but building a future that is sustainable, well-planned and truly beneficial for both current and future residents. This means investing in our infrastructure, schools, public transport and amenities before allowing such large-scale development to proceed. Development without infrastructure is worrying for the people of Wokingham, and in this case, particularly in Shinfield. I feel this local plan leaves residents, and particularly parents and children in Shinfield, with increased, not reduced, uncertainty. And it's for that reason that I will be voting against.
Joseph Barley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that now the only reasonable chance of stopping what is one of the most unsustainable plans to ever be presented has just been shot down by this administration, Wokingham Borough is now effectively staring down the barrel of a gun. As councillors, we can have far more time to deliberate over planning applications, whose documentation rarely exceeds 10% of the LPU's total pages. The latter was provided to us only last week. And even in that week, councillors have uncovered substantive exclusions of evidence used to justify core components of major proposals in the document. From traffic modelling to education numbers, we've had to hunt for these critical pieces of information for our various meetings with officers over the past week, for which we are incredibly thankful for helping us to try and understand these proposals in such a limited time. Even with all this, I cannot, with good conscience, vote for a local plan that isn't just one that isn't right for Wokingham, it's one that hasn't had the appropriate time to be considered and scrutinised by the residents of Wokingham's democratically elected representatives. As stated earlier, we know that Hall Farm will almost undoubtedly suffer from a lack of service provision for potentially decades to come. With years of Section 106 delays and violations, there persists a genuine threat that the Arborfield Greens Community Hub could ultimately never be delivered. How can this council expect surrounding settlements, who have already been holding Barkham and Arborfield service and infrastructure demands up by the shoulders, to do it all over again? It simply isn't possible, and communities in the south of Wokingham Borough would experience supply-led shortfalls like the borough has never seen before. The consequences are unimaginable, and this plan flagrantly understates the disproportionate allocation of housing in Wokingham Borough. If we presume the LPU in its current form stays unchanged and said proposed developments were built, when comparing households registered to vote with SDL and SS14 LPU housing allocations, the worst effective ward in Wokingham's constituency, as to no surprise, is Barkham and Arborfield, which will see a 121% increase in the number of dwellings. This equates to 67% of the LPU's total residential allocation, and for comparison, the ward in second place is around a quarter of that. Now I challenge everyone in this room, drive down to Barkham and Arborfield, knock on a resident's door, and tell them with a straight face that those figures are fair. Given there is so much wrong with the LPU, I plead to all councillors tonight again, vote against this LPU. The administration still has a chance to back down and reconsider this unsustainable plan, because if they don't, the entire south of the borough will never forgive them for the damage they're about to unleash.
Thanks. Can you mute your microphone? Thanks. Mark Brunel-Walker, please.
Thank you. I hadn't really got much of an intention to speak tonight, but I wanted to respond to a couple of the points. I am going to vote in favour of this, unsurprisingly, but I'm also grateful that I've been reminded that, yes, I did campaign to have Prior's Farm removed. It's clearly on social media. One of the comments made by a previous candidate who didn't manage to retain his seat at the last election was to also remove Prior's Farm. That was a pledge and a promise that the Conservative candidate made, and that wasn't in the motion that was rejected earlier. So there's a little bit of kind of double standards here. I did make the promise, and when I went round and I knocked on people's doors and I spoke to hundreds of people, I said it was going to be a tall order. I said it was going to be a really hard task to remove a site from the plan that had already had the principle of development firmly established. That point was accepted by residents. When I talked to them further, I made it clear that if the site did go forward, and if it was put into the plan and the plans came forward, and we know that the plans have been submitted already from the developers, that part of the job of councillors, all of us, was to work closely with the developers to get the best scheme possible for residents. I wanted to make another point on the same sort of topic, actually. And one of the reasons I want to make sure that the infrastructure is right, that the funding is right, and the scheme is right, and that it benefits all residents of the area, not just those of the new development. At the top of my road, and in fact behind my house, is the Bewley Homes development. And previous councillors made grand promises that local residents would not suffer negative consequences from the impact of the delivery of that. And the 20-odd million pounds of Section 106 and SIL money that came directly from that development did not benefit Wokingham without residents one penny. Most of the money that was allocated, the tiny bit that came into the ward, has gone on to Gorse Right, which is a phenomenal scheme, and it's great to come forward. But the rest of it, the jewel of the council for Pinewood, when we had that came into the local plan, when that was requiring some housing numbers to justify investment, having seen massive underinvestment according to the claims of previous colleagues, it makes me sick at the hypocrisy of what I'm hearing from across the room. I've been a councillor for 20 years. There's process, there's timelines. Can I finish, or are you just going to continually interrupt me? Thank you. I'm going to vote for this, and I am voting in favour of it because I made a promise to residents not just for here, but for the good of the borough as a whole. I disagree fundamentally with the comments that we're staring down the barrel of a gun. I mean, it's a stupid comment to make. If we don't get this passed now, then we face planning Armageddon here. We need to get this plan passed. We need to get it forward. We need to get it to the next stage to give protection and to give certainty to the residents of this borough as a whole. And then when we come back, and yes, we're going to have to start working on another plan for the higher number, but that gives us time, it gives us protection, and it gives us the infrastructure. I feel really sorry, and I've listened to all the comments that have been made about the whole farm development, and I've seen firsthand in many different areas, including the development at Bucklers Park at the top of my road. I'm out of time.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
That's it.
Rachel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first commitment we make as Labour councillors in Wokingham is to represent and advocate for the interests of our residents and their communities. That commitment is on the first page of the manifesto on which we were all elected. We recognise the serious implications of not having a local plan. However, as Wokingham Labour councillors, our duty remains to the people we serve. Therefore, I have granted my group a free vote on the local plan this evening, enabling each councillor in my group to make an independent judgment on how to best represent the views and interests of the constituents they were elected to serve. Many of us who have served as councillors for some time have undoubtedly received those distressing calls from residents living in cramped or unsuitable accommodation that fails to meet their families' needs. Despite advocating on their behalf with council officers, we learn they are already at the highest priority on the waiting list, only to be told there simply aren't enough social homes to go around. One of the most difficult aspects of being a councillor is the frustration of wanting to assist those in need but being unable to do so. Currently, there are 1,300 households on the housing waiting list, with 600 of those classified as inadequately housed or facing significant or urgent housing needs. That is unacceptable. As well as those on the housing waiting list, there are thousands more stuck at home with their parents, priced out of the housing market, and thousands more trapped in ever more expensive private rental accommodation, never knowing if their landlord will decide to end their tenancy from one month to the next. We need to be able to deliver quality, affordable and social housing. This group believes the best way to do that is council houses, which offer residents affordable rents and security of tenure, benefiting not just those residents, but the housing market overall. The provision of adequate infrastructure, as we have heard, is a crucial component of any successful local plan. Many of us have heard concerns from residents about insufficient access to shops, to schools, transport links and open spaces when new housing developments are introduced. And while this local plan contains apparently many positive assurances, we're all aware that in recent years infrastructure delivery has often lagged behind development, leaving residents feeling let down, and that must change. The Conservatives, I note, have spent recent months both berating the Lib Dem administration for not having a new plan, while simultaneously criticising the formation of said plan and actually wanting to delay it further, despite the fact that much of it is similar to what was originally put forward by their group. In the absence of a plan, development will still happen, but it will come forward on a piecemeal basis with much less public engagement, fewer guarantees that it suits the needs of our borough overall, or will provide appropriate infrastructure. But to pretend there is a way to have a local plan and simultaneously protect all of our green spaces from any development would be dishonest. The Conservatives appear to advocate for a Schrodinger's local plan, which will simultaneously deliver all the houses we need while protecting all the green spaces we want. We owe it to our residents to do better. This evening, every member of my group will make their own best judgment as to the best interests of the residents who sent them here and the communities that we serve. Thank you.
Dave Edmonds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The word democracy is derived from the Greek word demokratia, which effectively means rule by the people. The governing party in this chamber even has the word Democrat in its name. In our democratic society, we hold regular elections, where candidates and parties set out what they will do if chosen to represent the residents in their area. I made it very clear to the residents I represent that I did not believe that the thousands of houses at Hall Farm was an appropriate development. I was elected based on that view. So I'm honour bound in our democracy to oppose this plan, and I guarantee this chamber I will do that. Councillor Catherine Glover opposed the Hall Farm development. In fact, there are pictures of us both as a demonstration with placards saying "Stop Hall Farm." When she was re-elected in May, she gave no indication that her position on this development had changed, so she is honour bound to oppose this plan. Councillors Mark Brunel Walker and Jordan Montgomery got elected saying they would oppose 835 houses in Wokingham without. They're honour bound to oppose this plan, as it now contains 1,100 there. Our Liberal Democrat MP, the most prominent Liberal Democrat in Wokingham, actively opposed the Hall Farm development and was also in the photo I mentioned earlier with placard in hand. He is honour bound to continue to oppose this development. There are many others I could name, but I know I am limited by time. However, I will end by saying this. Politicians have a duty to their residents to be honest and to act with integrity. Any councillor here who votes for this plan when it contains housing they have pledged to oppose has deceived their residents and treated them with contempt. I therefore implore any of you now wrestling with your conscience to keep your integrity, stand with me and the Conservative group and vote to oppose this plan. Do your duty, put the people first, keep your honour. Thank you.
Martin Alder, please.
One of the things with these mics, they're a bit short for the two of us. Really talking about the green belt, the borough has a part of the metropolitan green belt in the northern part of the borough, and it's a very important part of the green belt. It stretches northwards from Twyford, Sherlock Row up towards the River Thames. It takes up quite a big area of the northern part of the borough, and its size, location and the rules applying to it are all in the remit of central government, not the local authority. Development with the green belt, within the green belt is strictly controlled as described in the policy in the pages on the proposed local plan. There's significant restrictions on the options for development, and the north of the borough in particular, what any of us might otherwise have been led to believe. In addition, with the Thames and the Loddon flowing through the area, there are some other significant environmental issues, flooding in the floodplain and the poor drainage of the low-lying areas to consider. It must be pointed out when considering the development sites that whatever sites have been previously identified for development while constructing a plan within the borough as part of the consultation process, these cannot be unidentified because other new sites have been proposed later. Thus, the originals will still continue to be developed regardless of how many new sites are added. Greenbelt is just another feature that restricts the location of development options, as geographical features do so as well, and that's the realities of the development. However, it also provides an important asset to the borough, which I'm glad that Councillor Jorgensen noted that Greenbelt is very important, but Joseph seemed to have forgotten that the proposal in the Twyford area was smack bang in the middle of the prime agricultural land of the Greenbelt. It's an asset for us. It's not an asset just for those people living next door to it. I'm talking of an asset for the whole borough. The Greenbelt area that's concerned provides a large open space, an open land, which is a benefit for all of our residents throughout the borough. I see them all the time when I'm out taking my own exercise, my bicycle mainly. This aspect of the essential part of the green environment for our own health and well-being is now well understood. If this area of land were to be lost, as Joseph suggested, then it would be a loss for the whole borough and it would be forever. There would be a huge loss.
Point of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Joseph.
I never suggested that Twyford should be included as a site. I just merely said that arguments for why Twyford and arguments used for why Twyford and Ashridge were put into the local plan were potentially not given the same fair weight for said arguments when it was considered in regard to the LVGV SDL.
Thank you. The consequence would have been, had it been included, the green belt would have gone. And that's a fact. And remember, this land we lost, it would be for the whole borough a great big loss, and it's forever. There's no coming back. There'll be no equivalent large space created anywhere else in the borough to replace it. Proposing to offer up and destroy existing green belt in some form of communal self-harm would be a bizarre choice to put forward, as Councillor Jorgensen suggested. For those areas in the boroughs where the plan has managed to get more designated green spaces with similar protections to Greenbelt, my colleague Caroline will be talking.
Sorry, Martin, you're out of time.
Sorry, apologise slightly, but that was basically it, the end of it.
George Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in opposition to this local plan update, which I believe will do more harm than good for our borough. While I want to acknowledge the hard work of the officers who brought this plan to this stage, which includes lots of policies that I think many councillors can support, we must recognise that this plan is deeply flawed and not fit for Wokingham's future. I also want to stress the point that's already been made about the completely inadequate amount of time that we've had to review this massive document, running to over 1,500 pages. I need to ask, why didn't this local plan go through a scrutiny committee like other substantial decisions this council makes? A plan of this magnitude, which will shape Wokingham's development for years to come, should have been subject to the same rigorous process we follow for other major decisions. Let's also not forget that the Liberal Democrats have sat on this local plan for nearly 2.5 years. They've repeatedly kicked the can down the road, postponing the release of this plan until after local elections, and now they release it just as the Lib Dem gets elected as Wokingham's MP. What does that say about the priorities here? The timing is highly questionable, and it raises serious concerns about whether their plan was delayed for political convenience, rather than for the benefit of our borough. One of the most glaring examples is Hall Farm. The Liberal Democrats have made repeated promises to residents during several election campaigns that they would remove Hall Farm from the local plan. Yet here we are, with Hall Farm still very much part of it. This is a significant development site with thousands of homes proposed. It disproportionately burdens Barkham and Arborfield, where there is already significant developments, with several years still left of building. Residents were promised that Hall Farm would not go ahead under a Liberal Democrat-controlled council. Indeed, they stood there at the protest, waving their placards. Did they just do this for the votes? Why is the local plan prioritising Barkham Square as an extension of Arborfield Green? an area that already lacks the necessary infrastructure for the 5,000 houses being built in and around this area. There are other proposed sites in the local plan that potentially could be deemed more suitable, yet it seems this administration has chosen to protect certain wards while burdening others. I also want to say I will continue to support all of the new residents to the new homes being built in Arbrofield Green and push for the infrastructure to be built. Now, I'll remind all of you that this evening, Councillor Barley and I gave all councillors the opportunity to remove Hall Farm and Barkham Square from the local plan through an amendment to this item. But the Liberal Democrats have not voted for it, and the Conservatives have been the ones that have done what we promised to our residents. I cannot, in good conscience, vote for a proposal that goes against so many promises made to our residents, puts such a high and disproportionate burden on Barkham and Arbrofield, and where we've been given so little time to take the due care to scrutinise it. I urge all councillors to vote against this local plan update. Thank you.
Catherine Glover, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 2022, I did indeed say no to 4,500 houses at Hall Farm, but I would be treating my residents with contempt if I were to vote against this plan, because it would leave us exposed to speculative development. I'm also known to be against overdevelopment, but the government requires us to build new homes, homes which people urgently need. And nearly every resident who has spoken to me on the subject says that what they are against is development without the necessary infrastructure. I agree with them. Development without the necessary infrastructure is overdevelopment. Although I still have reservations, I am pleased to see that so much infrastructure to support the reduced number of homes at Loddon Garden Village is expected to be fully funded or delivered by the developers. Over £118 million on schools, including an eight-form secondary school and a 300-pupil sixth form. Over £137 million on active travel and highways improvements. 3.2 million on more GP surgeries. And over £25 million on sports and open spaces, including one of the largest country parks delivered in the south of England in decades, a country park centred around the River Loddon. Everyone round there knows that the River Loddon floods. Building will be above the flood level. The plan proposes flood mitigation, which could reduce the likelihood of downstream flooding as well. If the homes proposed for Loddon Garden Village were to be dispersed all over the borough, or even a couple of other sites, we wouldn't get this necessary infrastructure. Every one of us lives on what used to be farmland, commons or woods. We know our children need or will need to be able to afford homes, and I believe that this plan will develop the right homes in the right places for them.
Vishal Srinivasan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like everyone to think of them as a resident of not just their borough, but the resident of the boroughs affected. Like my colleague said for Shinfield, we are already dealing with a lot of issues. For example, residents keep asking me about school places as their children don't have the school they want. They're not able to go to the school that they want right now. And I highly doubt that when these homes are built, that would become easier to achieve. Given how busy and crowded the area already is, our main issue is why there and why not somewhere else. And just to let you know, the estimate for the number of cars to be in the area is around 5,000. 5,000 new cars will be in the area, already on cramped roads, already on roads that have heavy traffic during rush hour, and I struggle to see how this can be beneficial for existing residents. And if the whole point was to give new residents opportunities, why is this at the expense or at the cost of current residents? When residents have voted for you, they voted for you assuming certain things, and I highly doubt that they voted for you assuming that you would do this for them. I think there should be a reconsideration in the fact that maybe some sort of questionnaire, maybe some sort of referendum even, to ask whether residents actually want this, and if so, to make sure that whatever's being proposed is actually agreed upon and not just something that is being forced by the people elected. Thank you.
Stephen Newton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am delighted that the revised draft local plan is ready for pre-consultation and submission due to the protections and opportunities it will provide to residents. It has taken many hours of work by officers and several executive members of different political parties to get to this position, which takes into account the feedback from the previous consultations and the aspiration to provide suitable homes for local residents, whilst having to work within the constraints and limitations imposed by the two previous Conservative-led draft local plans, particularly a local plan issued for consultation in 2021, which included significant developments at Hall Farm, including hundreds of additional houses than are proposed now. I am pleased to see that there are many improvements contained within this updated local plan to really support local residents, as acknowledged by the Leader of the Opposition. But the area I would particularly like to draw to your attention relates to affordable homes and those available for social rent. Many residents have expressed their concern to me about the lack of affordable housing, particularly for their children who understandably want to have independence and either get a foothold in the housing market or be able to rent somewhere affordable locally. These opportunities simply didn't exist for many local people in the past, as there was a failure to focus on the right homes in the right places. This updated local plan sets a more ambitious target of 40% of housing in the proposed Loddon Valley Garden Village, Arborfield Green and South Wokingham strategic developments being affordable, with the priority tenure being social rented housing. This will provide opportunities for many local people to find suitable housing in the coming years to either rent or buy, and particularly help our young people who are on lower incomes and have been less able to secure mortgage financing and get a home of their own. I hope that all members will agree that the updated local plan provides significant benefits for our residents compared to the previous efforts and would join with me in supporting it this evening, whilst recognising that it could perhaps have been even better if it were not so constrained by what was included previously.
Prue, as the seconder, you have the right to speak now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. All of us have strong opinions on this. Some of us have expressed them in public in past years. However, I think the only sane thing to do when the facts change is to change your mind. And it is a very great pity that neither the Leader of the Opposition nor many of her Conservative colleagues have acknowledged that the world has changed since the general election in 2024. And we are in a new planning climate. It is also a great pity that the Leader of the Conservative group and her colleagues appear to have forgotten that every aspect of this local plan has been developed through a cross-party planning policy member working group. And I have here a long list of meetings to which various Conservatives have been invited, have been sent the papers, but sadly did not attend. You had the opportunity to influence it, you chose not to attend. That is absolutely true. You can scrutinise these papers afterwards. They're a complete list of all the meetings that have been held since we took control. We know there are residents who don't want...
Hold on, Prue, just a second.
Point of personal explanation, I was actually on that group and I can honestly say that I haven't received any
That's not
invites.
a valid one because you haven't said anything today.
Okay, well, it's a point
Can
of
you please
personal
sit down?
explanation based on an accusation made about a group that I belong to and I haven't received any invitations
Please sit down.
to it.
Prue.
Thank you. I can confirm to Rebecca that she was present at a meeting on the 16th of August 2022. So she certainly had, and on the 20th of September 2022, and so on. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but she definitely did receive it. Right. Okay. We know that there are residents who don't want particular developments, and we know that there are residents who worry about the overall increase in the number of houses. But imagine what will happen when they find out that as a result of not having agreed this local plan, the number of extra houses that have to be built goes from 748 a year to 1,308 a year, almost overnight. If we took every single site that developers and landowners put forward for the local plan, however unsuitable, I doubt we would have enough sites for that number of houses. But without the local plan, we will have no sites identified to put those houses on. The land identified in the old plan has almost run out. Without this new local plan, we'll be faced with a development free-for-all, powerless to stop it. And as for infrastructure, forget it. You think the current situation is bad? Just wait. But if the local plan does go through tonight, and we go on to get it to the planning inspector in a timely manner, it buys us time. We won't immediately move to 1,308 houses a year. We will be able to stick with 748 for the next few years. And that's 748 on sites we know are able to take development, even if we don't like all of them very much. We will have a breathing space to work out how to meet the challenge of the new housing numbers. That is the reality of the choice before us tonight. And that's the reality of the choice since July 2024. Support the local plan and gain some measure of control and protection, or throw it out this evening and plunge us into development chaos. I know which one is in the best interests of our residents, and I will most definitely be supporting the local plan this evening.
Stephen, as the proposer, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I respect the commitment and determination of those members of the public who are here to oppose the local plan this evening. Local plans are always controversial and unfortunately always cause upset and dismay to some existing residents. I wish that could be avoided, but it cannot be. We have no choice but to deliver the housing numbers required of us by government, and wherever we allocate land to accommodate them will be unpopular. We have been guided in our site selection by the draft plan we inherited from the previous administration, which we subjected to further rigorous assessment and evidence gathering. The final choice was determined by site availability, the sites promoted to us by landowners, site suitability determined by national and local policies and technical appraisals, and site deliverability, whether a site could provide the required number of dwellings in the planned period. On those grounds, and those grounds alone, we made our selection. This has been an interesting debate with many impressive contributions. I'll focus my final words on the reasons why you should support the plan before you. First, I want to emphasise what the local plan can deliver. A new secondary school in the south of the borough, where it's most needed. The opportunity for a reduction of flood risk. A new country park. Many more new affordable homes for members of our community who desperately need them. Energy efficient new homes that will save residents money and help them lead healthier lives. The highest level of protection against development in over 100 local green spaces. Areas of valued landscape across the borough where development can be controlled. All these benefits and more are within our reach if we support the new local plan this evening. If you vote for the plan, you also give us the opportunity to proceed on the current numbers, 748 dwellings a year, rather than the 1,308 a year we will be expected to deliver if we fail to approve the plan before you and miss the narrow window available to us under the government's transitional arrangements. If you approve the plan this evening, we can prepare for the challenges of the higher numbers in a more considered and measured way, protected from inappropriate speculative development and inadequate infrastructure by our new plan. So, councillors, I hope you will now put thoughts of short-term party political advantage out of your minds, be responsible, and recognise the importance of the big picture. Do the right thing by the borough and support the new local plan.
Hopefully everybody considers that we've had a fair airing of this key topic. We spent just over an hour and a half on it. Therefore, we now move to a vote on this item. Peter? Yeah. Okay, we'll get a recorded vote. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you. So this is, if you can say, for, against or abstain in terms of the local plan. Councillor Alawat.
Against.
Councillor Ainsley.
For.
Councillor Akhtar.
Against.
Councillor Alder.
For.
Councillor Olvey.
For.
Councillor Andrea.
For.
Councillor Ashwell.
For.
Against.
Councillor Bell.
Against.
Councillor Bellow.
For.
Councillor Betteridge.
For.
Firth.
For.
Councillor Bray.
For.
Councillor Brunel Walker.
For.
Councillor Burgess.
For.
Councillor Comer.
For.
Councillor Conway.
For.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Edmonds.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Freeney.
Abstain.
Councillor Gilder.
Against.
Councillor Glover.
For.
Councillor Gray.
Against.
Councillor Harding.
For.
Councillor Hare.
For.
Councillor Harper.
Against.
Councillor Inyangamvana.
Against.
Councillor Jewell.
For.
Councillor de Jong. Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Against.
Councillor Charles Magetz.
Against.
Councillor Rebecca Magetz.
Against.
Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor Montgomery.
For.
Councillor Nagella.
For.
Councillor Nagra.
Abstain.
Councillor Newton.
For. For.
Councillor Rowland.
For.
Councillor Salmon.
Against.
Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
For.
Councillor Srinivasan.
Against.
Councillor Swaddle.
Against.
Councillor Timlin.
For.
Councillor Turtle.
Against.
Councillor Wayhill.
For.
Councillor Eunice.
Against.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. The recommendations are carried. Now we move back to home to school transport. Before this item is introduced, please note that there is an additional recommendation to this item which has been published as Supplementary Agenda 3 Further, some additional information has been tabled this evening, which should be considered alongside the main report for this item. I understand Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay is proposing this report. Is that correct? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Prue. Imogen, would you like to speak to the report?
Yes, thank you. The changes proposed here are for the Stage 2 home to school transport appeals and will be bringing our processes in line with most councils in this country. The home to school transport budget is under huge pressure and has been rising year on year, so it will essentially ensure that all of our decisions are made in line with our council policies, ensuring that they are applied fairly and evenly to all of our children. This will also reduce the risk of appeals going to judicial review and the council being fined, which is a very real risk if we are not consistent with our approach and the application of our policies. It is therefore proposed that some of our assistant directors will be given the appropriate legal training and will be utilised to constitute the panel for Stage 2 home to school transport appeals. These people will not be the same people who reviewed the initial Stage 1 appeals and would have the appropriate legal training for this level and will use the policies that the councillors have agreed to. We are also adding some additional support for members who will be able to make representations for residents at these appeals. These can be done either in person or in a written statement. Members would also be able to provide residents with the advice and support on getting the best outcome. These Stage 2 appeals are just a legal process and do not have much latitude for decision making. Deviating from these policies put the council at risk as well as compromising how best to use our limited funding to meet the needs of all of our children. But it provides additional opportunity to present the case for the child. I'm aware that some of our members have mistakenly thought that we could change items in the home to school transport policies here, but sadly that is not why we are here tonight. The decision is just about the home to school transport appeals process, and any questions about our policies need to be considered as a separate matter. Essentially, you feel if the policies are not working, it is those that we need to fix, not the process. After some discussion at the Constitution Review Working Group, these changes were eventually agreed across all members and political representatives, but with the condition that councillors still are able to very much make representations and defend the residents, which was universally agreed. I would also like to draw your attention to the supplementary papers that we now have, where we have agreement from our officers and additional recommendations for items. This is to provide support to the Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee in the first year of our operation, and after these changes provide this report on an annual basis. Members will be able to make observations on the process, and hopefully they will satisfy anyone who has concerns and will allow us to examine the process to see if anything else needs changing. Thank you.
Thank you, Imogen. Does any member wish to speak against the report? Okay. Can we can you keep your hands up if you'd like to speak on this report? So the officers can make a list. Was your hand up, Prue, or not? Sorry. Okay, Rebecca Margetts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and keep it brief. I do oppose the change to this process. I have recently been sat on these committees where residents and families do feel that this is an important part of the democratic process and feel they have the right to be heard. And the members that then sit on these committees do follow a clear process and follow the procedure and are guided by officers, and I don't personally see why that should change. It is important that our residents feel that there is a fair appeals process and that they are listened to, and I feel as our role as members is to do that, and by removing that, I do not feel this is a fair process, so I will vote against this.
Stephen Newton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe we can all agree that having a fair, consistent and accessible process for applying for home to school transport and for hearing any appeals is important, and we can all support that objective. Fairness should not only apply to the applicants and the children, but it should also include other stakeholders, including all of our residents who ultimately fund most of our services. I note that this change has been recommended by the Constitutional Review Working Group at their meeting on 22nd of August, which is made up of representatives of all political groups within this council. And I'm also pleased to see the proposal to provide a report to Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee in due course. However, as this is a change in terms of delegating responsibility that has previously sat with elected members to officers, I think that it is appropriate to put some measures in place to ensure that the change doesn't have a detrimental impact. Therefore, can I ask for commitments to the following if this proposal is accepted? That the report prepared by the officers for the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee considers not only the effectiveness of the new process, but looks at whether the change has achieved the overall objective, and do they recommend to members any further changes to the process. I note that it is intended to provide the appropriate legal training to officers. Can the same training be provided to members, so that if we are called upon to provide support by a resident, we are in the best position possible to do so, and to provide them with the most appropriate advice and support? This training should cover the entire process from making the application through to the appeal. If officers or members identify any deficiencies, errors or omissions within either the process or the policy, that they can feed this into the review process for consideration and potential inclusion within the report and any recommendations that come out of the review. In addition to the review by the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that this is also considered by the Audit Committee to consider the effectiveness of the review and report and the progress with implementing any recommendations and the subsequent effectiveness of those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Shahid Yunus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand to oppose the recommendation to reconstitute a home to school transport stage 2 appeal with membership comprising solely of WPC assistant directors. While the proposal may be well intended and seek to promote consistency and fairness, I'm concerned that this change risks undermining the fundamental principle: justice must not only be done, but must also seen to be done. If this recommendation is approved, it risks creating a system where officers who are responsible for upholding council policies will be perceived as acting as prosecutors, judges, and juries. This will not inspire confidence in the appeals process. Families facing difficult situations often feel vulnerable, and if they believe the panel is merely an extension of the council's bureaucracy, they are unlikely to trust that their appeal will be heard fairly. This can easily erode trust in the system, leaving families feeling that the appeals process is weighted against them from the start. I have sat on numerous stage 2 appeals over the years. Many times I have seen firsthand how the current system, composed of more balanced panel, works in favor of justice. In fact, on multiple occasions, the panel ruled against the officer's recommendation after careful consideration of the unique circumstances presented by the families. This independent element ensures that all sides are fairly considered and helps foster trust in the process. As elected members, our goal should be to ensure that the stage 2 appeals process is transparent and accessible, with the decisions made impartially and fairly. Reconstituting the panel to consist only of the senior officers removes that necessary independence. It creates a perception that the very people who set and enforce policies are also responsible for reviewing their fairness, leaving parents with the impression that their voices may not be fully heard. Opposing this recommendation is not political score pointing. It is not opposition for the sake of opposition. It is about transparency, fairness, and justice. The outcome of these decisions immensely impact the lives of families and children. Therefore, to conclude, I urge all of you to vote against the recommendation. Let us preserve the integrity and impartiality of the appeal process by keeping a balanced and representative panel that truly serves the interests of our residents. Thank you.
Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't actually intending to speak on this, but I really completely agree with Shahid. I don't think this needs to be a political issue. I'm not quite sure what problem we're actually trying to solve here. I mean, the point Stephen Newton made were extremely right, were very good. What we need to do is make sure that people are properly trained so that they make the right decisions following the rules. And I think the fact you've got councillors as the final level of appeal gives people confidence that it is truly an independent process rather than one that's just wound up in the bureaucracy of faceless civil servants, which is how the public will look at this. So I think we're trying to solve the wrong problem. I think Stephen's suggestion, which is to actually provide better training on the rules to make sure that people make the right decisions, is a much better solution than trying to hide the decision in a morass of back office, well-meaning civil servants.
Prue, as the seconder, sorry.
Oh, is this...
Sorry, was there somebody else to speak? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Again, I wasn't intending to speak, but I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points. I think actually Shahid made a really compelling argument for this, for taking this forward. I think it is all about fairness and consistency in this, and I think you sort of really showed how the system in its place is not fair. Because actually what we've got at the moment is, you know, I agree with the point that councillors have the right to support residents and sort of help them, guide them through a process and maybe advocate for them if necessary. But the actual application of the policy is essentially a legal process and one which should be applied by sort of officers who have absolutely the right training for it. The issue is, and I think Pauline said she doesn't know what the problem is, but the problem at the moment is that the stage 2 appeals process is not being applied consistently, and it's that stage 2 panel, which I believe, as officers have told me, is not functioning correctly. So I think that's why it needs a change, because that is the problem, and it's creating a 2-tier system where people, if they decide to go for an appeal, will get that granted, because those rules aren't being applied effectively. So I do think there needs to be training by the panel, and I think it needs to be applied consistently. And I think the only way of doing that is to go with this recommendation.
Prue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm tempted to say what Andrew said. I can understand that removing members from processes goes against the instinct of some members, in fact, many members. I think Imogen explained why we need to do this. Andrew has explained also powerfully why we need to do this. There is a commitment, an absolute commitment, that both the appeals process and the home to school transport policy itself will be kept under review. And that's a commitment. We've added some, the supplementary paper which clarifies that, and we've added the recommendation to make sure it goes to overview and scrutiny. Steve Newton asked me to make some commitments or to get some commitments. I am absolutely sure and can commit to the fact that Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny will look at both the effectiveness and whether it's achieved the objectives. And they will have the opportunity to feedback, and that is enshrined in those extra clarifications in the supplementary paper. There absolutely must be training for members on the whole process, the whole thing from application onwards. This is the first time, incidentally, that we've enshrined in the process a right for somebody to ask their local councillor to come with them to the appeal and to help them with that application. So that training is more important than ever to make sure that people understand what it is, because it is a legal process and you're not being asked to judge should that child be eligible or not, but whether the process has been applied correctly. And that's sometimes difficult for people to understand. I am sad that Shahid and others feel that our officers would not be able to be fair and impartial. I am sure they would. We're talking about senior officers of the council here who would receive the proper training.
Shahid?
Point of explanation, I think that is a misrepresentation of what I said, Prue. I did not actually undermine the officers, their integrity and their professionalism. Point I made is about fairness, transparency and independent sort of independence, which does not constitute, the constitute the members, the extended members of the the executive or the etc. But I did not say anything of the officers.
If you say that, then I will have to believe you. But it did come across rather like that. I'm sorry to say. Yes, you will be able to review to feed into the review process, and yes, the audit committee can look at it. Although, of course, the audit committee needs to request it to look at it. And I know Steve is on the audit committee, so he may well request it. But those things are all fine. We are not looking to destroy a process. We are looking to make sure that we've got a process with integrity that doesn't drop the council in it accidentally because of misapplying the rules. That's basically it, and it will operate for a year, and we can then review it to make sure that it has met those objectives. And if it doesn't, I'm sure we will do something about it. Thank you.
We now move to vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as detailed out in the report, please raise your hand. All of those against? Abstentions? The report is carried. Thank you. Now we move on to questions, member question time. And just a reminder that the supplementary question must relate to the original question or the response that's being given. We have 10 questions. Charles Margetts, would you like to put your question first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Stephen. Residents in my ward are very concerned about the scale of development which is planned along Barkham Ride. One of the main concerns is a lack of coordination between, or a possible lack of coordination, I should say, between the various WBC and private developments in the area. I raised this overview and scrutiny in March, and it was agreed that the council would set up a steering group to manage the scale and impact of development. This was to consist of members from Finch, Hampstead and Barkham, as well as officers, to ensure local people have influence in the process. The council agreed in principle to set this up, but at time of writing, no meetings have been set up and no terms of reference agreed. Since March, the Planning Committee has approved housing developments at 31 and 33 Barkham Ride, totalling 87 houses, and a further application has now arrived for 60 houses at 24 Barkham Ride. I'll revise the next bit because obviously that's changed tonight, but Barkham Ride Square is now part of the local plan with 600 houses there. My question is, if the council does not wish to set up the management group, how else does it plan to coordinate the significant scale of development in this area?
Thank you for your question, Charles. And you are, of course, quite right to say that we agreed at overview and scrutiny to set up a coordinating programme board. Bringing this back to overview and scrutiny, which we should do, as it was overview and scrutiny that raised the matter at your instigation, I believe, if I remember correctly. That was delayed by the local and then general election campaigns, during which nearly all public-facing meetings were, of course, cancelled to avoid breaking PERDA rules. Now the elections are behind us, I should like to bring the details of the proposed new programme board to overview and scrutiny at the first opportunity. I understand fully the need for such coordinating oversight, and I'm keen to involve local borough councillors. I'm glad you withdrew your point about Rook's Nest, because as you know, that is not appearing in the plan for housing. Thank you.
Charles, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. I welcome your commitment to that. I would just note, it's my understanding, I'm no longer on overview and scrutiny, but I'm of the understanding that that action is shown as completed and not awaiting any further action. Please correct me if I'm wrong, any members of that committee. I'll repeat if you wish. Yeah, I said basically that it's my understanding, I'm not on overview and scrutiny anymore, that that action is showing as completed in the actual menu pack, basically, so as that no further action is needed. Could I ask that you have a look at that and rectify that? And could I ask as well that if possible, that is brought to the next overview and scrutiny committee so we can get this committee together and get some control and influence over what's going on?
If that is stated in the menu pack, as you put it, then it does need to be corrected because this action has not been completed. It will be brought at the first possible opportunity to an overview and scrutiny committee. Officers are working on this, and we should be able to do that very soon, I hope. Thank you.
Sam Akhtar, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for the Executive Member for Active Travel, Highways and Transport. Recently, Reading Borough Council implemented a new bus lane along London Road, reducing the road to single lane for other vehicles. While this initiative may encourage greater bus use, I have received a significant number of complaints from residents across Wokingham Borough. They report that this change has led to increased congestion, more stationary traffic, and a displacement of vehicles onto roads within our borough, particularly near the boundary with Reading. Could the Exec Member please confirm whether Wokingham Borough Council was consulted on this proposal by Reading Borough Council?
Well, as you probably gathered, Sam, I'm afraid you've got me rather than Paul to answer this. So it's not going to be as polished an answer as you would have got from Paul, I'm quite sure. But thank you for the question. It is a really important matter that you're raising, which I have to say concerns me greatly also. I can confirm that Wokingham Borough Council were aware of the proposal as detailed within Reading Borough's Council's Bus Service Improvement Plan. We are, however, not aware of any formal stakeholder consultation on the scheme, although do note that a public consultation was undertaken. We have approached Reading Borough Council about the scheme because we share your concerns, and we are now working with them to see what can be done to improve travel into Reading from Wokingham Borough. Our aim is to find a solution which supports progress with the climate emergency and encourages sustainable transport, whilst at the same time maintains reliable access into Reading for all modes of transport.
Sam, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. With regards to that, yeah, please if we get a written answer and confirmation of that, because I think one of the other complaints we've had from those regards to sustainable travel is even those travelling by bus are actually now finding that even the buses themselves are getting backed up. So actually it's leading to a double negative, both on those drivers who are unable to use public transport, but also the public transport users. Thank you.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you. All I can say at this stage is both Paul and I met with Reading Buses management recently to discuss a wide range of things relating to bus travel between Reading and Wokingham. And we did raise this issue, and it is a concern, as you've just said, to the bus company itself. So I'm hoping that Reading Borough Council will address this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Vishal Srinivasan, please.
My question's for the Executive Member for Children's Services, and it's just that residents in my ward have been contacting me about concerns about Oakbank School. I hear reports about significant staff turnover and declining academic performance, which is worrying as the one of the school's councillors. I'm aware it is an academy trust, and therefore the council doesn't have it has limited influence. But can the member update me on what the WBC is doing, if anything, and what, if so, plans to do?
Thank you for your question. We are aware of concerns in the community about the school. The school had an Ofsted inspection in the autumn of 2023, and this resulted in a requires improvement judgment. And naturally, this is a concern to everyone. As a local authority, we held a meeting with the trust leaders to discuss the issues and understand how these would be addressed. Oakbank is a member of the Anthem Multi-Academy Trust and is the responsibility of the trust management, and the local authority does not have direct control of the school. We do, however, recognise that schools tend to thrive when they have the support of their communities, and we have a deep interest in the provision for the children of our community attending the school. We're in regular conversation with colleagues at the Regional Director's Office who do have responsibility for the oversight of standards in the school, and we have shared our concerns and those of the community with the Regional Directorate team. The Regional Director has tools at her disposal to address concerns regarding the performance of schools under her jurisdiction. In the interests of the children of the community, we share the intelligence and information we have at local level to enable her to make a well-informed decision about her next steps. In parallel, our officers continue to forge relationships with the new and evolving leadership team at the school to ensure that we can keep an open line of communication through which to influence provision and advocate for the needs of our young people and their families. A new permanent head teacher has now been appointed to the school, and other key leadership posts have also been filled. After a period of staffing turbulence during the spring and early summer, we do understand that staffing for September has been secured. Regular contact meetings with local authority officers and school leaders are in place for the coming academic year to ensure effective lines of communication are sustained and positive relationships fostered for the benefit of the community. And we will continue to work with the levers we have to influence positive change. In the meantime, parents who are concerned...
Can you wrap up, please?
Last sentence, Mr Mayor. And wish to make representations can do so direct to the Regional Director's Office, and they can be contacted at rg.sc@education.gov.uk, and that email address will be in the minutes.
Vishal, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. It's just what advice would you give then for parents who are concerned about the situation of the school and how their children are educated?
Okay, this is a difficult situation for parents. The trust are the people who need to make improvements, and if they can't make them, then the regional director is the person with power to do something about it. So I would urge parents who have concerns to contact the regional director and express those concerns. I know that the parish council and a number of parents have done that. If they wish to copy those concerns to the council as well so that we know it's happened, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Rebecca Margetts, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question's to Stephen. In January 2024, I proposed the following motion, which was passed with cross-party support. This council believes that residents should receive the infrastructure and amenities that they are promised when they buy a new home, and that developers and this council should be held accountable for their legal obligations within major S106 agreements. For clarity, the major sites refer to strategic development sites, SDLs, and other large sites only. This council will provide a biannual report detailing performance against financial programme and other obligations of all parties within major S106 agreements, of which this council was a party. The report will be issued to all members of the council and relevant community groups. So increasing transparency on performance against commitments will provide confidence to communities that promises will be delivered on. This council will learn the lessons from the delays in the delivery of the Artfield Green Village Centre and other facilities and amenities across the SDL. So Stephen, please can you advise on the progress that has been made and when this council can expect to see its first biannual report?
Thank you very much for your question, Rebecca. It won't entirely surprise you to know that the planning team have been somewhat busy recently. We've had a local plan to prepare, and we've been moving at pace to try and make sure we can get the local plan before us this evening for the reasons that have been stated already. But the planning team has been tasked with producing the first iteration of the work, and it's intended to publish this soon. In the interim, if any member or member of the public wishes to find out information about a specific scheme, they can contact officers directly, and they will do their best to provide that information.
Thank you for that. So I'm pleased to hear that you feel there is some progress with this. But moving forward, and with the talk this evening of the promise to deliver infrastructure, this is incredibly important that we have transparency and this report. I hear you say we will receive it soon. When will that be? This motion was passed and it is council policy. And we have a duty to our residents to provide this report. So I'm afraid soon is a little bit loose. Stephen, could we please have a commitment that we will at least see a report by the end of this year? Thank you.
You will see a report as soon as possible. I can give that commitment. In the interim, as I said, if you need to know about any particular scheme, you should contact officers directly. And the officer who I think will probably be able to help you on all of the SDL sites is, of course, Connor Corrigan, who I'm sure you're aware of. Thank you.
Sarah Bell, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe my question is for Stephen. Residents in Shinfield are concerned about the extra costs of owning a home in a new housing development. In particular, the charges for the management and maintenance of SANGs, or suitable alternative natural green spaces. Do you think it is fair that residents in new housing developments are required to pay this charge in addition to council tax and estate management fees?
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, you are right. I do seem to have had to answer rather a lot of questions this evening. A number of development sites within the south of the M4 strategic development location are reliant upon SANGs that are privately owned and maintained by the landowner. Whilst the council resisted this approach to SANG delivery at the planning application stage, the principle of an estate rent charge to cover the ongoing maintenance of these SANGs was secured, I'm afraid, at the subsequent Shinfield West planning appeal. Occupiers that bought the homes on this site should, I hope, have been made aware of these changes by the legal advisors acting on their behalf when they purchased the property. I know that's very little compensation, but the council did not want to go down this route. It was imposed on us at appeal. Now, whilst there are measures within the planning permission that would allow the council to step in and take control of these SANGs, they can only be implemented by agreement with the owner, or if the owner fails to manage the site appropriately. Appropriate management is currently taking place, and therefore there is at the moment no basis for the council to exercise this step-in right. The council's preference is that developments within borough are required to transfer any new SANGs to the council with a commuted sum to cover the ongoing maintenance of the SANG. Indeed, aside from the two university-owned SANGs in Shinfield, all the SANGs within the other SDL sites, as well as the two SANGs in Spencer's Wood, are owned and managed by the council with no additional estate rent charge requirement.
Sarah, do you have a supplementary?
I do, and there's quite a lot to unpack in all of that to a degree. I'm pleased to hear about the onward process for the, and suggested transfer of SANG to the council. But I suppose I come back to my question about fairness for my residents in Shinfield now. Yes, some of them, that is something that we are looking at the moment, about whether or not they were truly aware of the charge and how it was to be applied. But would you still feel that it was fair if I told you that that charge was being applied inconsistently across the ward? That's both in terms of the amount and the households expected to pay it. Would you feel that it was fair if your residents were being charged the maximum capped amount, and that cap was index linked to the retail price index in perpetuity? And I suppose the real killer on this is that those RPI increases have been backdated before the homes were even purchased and any legal agreement was entered into. I'd like to ask more, but I'm not going to. Can I ask you again about the fairness around that for current residents now?
I think I can answer pretty straightforwardly on that. No, I don't think it's fair. But I wanted to repeat the point I made, that the council's preference is that developments within borough are required to transfer any new SANGs to the council with a commuted sum to cover ongoing maintenance of that sound. That is our preference, and that is what we will try and pursue at every opportunity. But unfortunately, we cannot overturn a decision made at appeal and conditions imposed by an appeal inspector. And that is what is constraining us in these circumstances. So I have absolute sympathy with your point, Sarah, which you've made very well. I don't think it's fair any more than you do.
Moses Inyan-Gumbena, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the Leader of the Council, who is also Stephen Conway. At the Planning Committee meeting of 12 June 2024, the Chair called for an adjournment at the end of consideration of one application before proceeding to the next. She retrospectively claimed at the 14th of August 2024 Planning Committee meeting that she indicated 3-minute duration, albeit not speaking into the microphone, and only council officers in the room appear to have heard her. This meant I came back after discussion had started with no attempt made to check that all members were present, and I was thus unable to vote on the application. I proposed an amendment to the minutes of the meeting to reflect the inaccuracy. However, the legal officer advised the Planning Committee members that only the accuracy of the minutes should be raised, citing paragraph 4.2.16.1 of the Constitution. However, the minutes of the full council meeting of 25th of July 2024 do refer to an adjournment at that meeting on page 7. And I quote, "At this point in the meeting, a short adjournment was held to consider the proposed amendment. This demonstrates that adjournments are normally referenced in the minutes of meeting. The minutes of the Planning Committee meeting of 12th of June 2024 were approved at the meeting of 14th August 2024 by Liberal Democrats and Labour members, making no reference to an adjournment or the fact that I was unable to vote. In light of the above, does the Leader of the Council believe that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting of 12th of June 2024 are accurate?"
Thank you for your question, Moses. I know this is a matter of great importance to you. I do understand why you are pursuing it. But I have to say, I am the Leader of the Council and I am the Executive Member for Planning and the Local Plan, as you probably gathered earlier this evening. But I do not have jurisdiction over the Planning Committee. I can't overturn the Planning Committee's minutes. The Planning Committee is a sovereign body. It has to approve its own minutes. And it did just that on the meeting of the 14th of August. It approved its own minutes. I should say, however, your amendment to the minutes, although it was put to the committee and wasn't accepted, it is recorded transparently in the record of those minutes. So there is a record of your concerns expressed, even though it was not carried by the committee on that day. So yes, you're correct. There are different accounts of the length of the adjournment, but there is no dispute that the adjournment took place. And I understand you're continuing to be in correspondence with the monitoring officer on this subject. And this is the right place. That is the right place for your concerns to be raised.
Moses, you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. You've not exactly answered my question as to the inconsistency between both minutes. But my supplementary question is this. Does the Leader accept that it does a disservice to residents to have records of meetings that don't accurately represent why councillors have not voted on an issue? And will he ensure that committee chairs are properly briefed on procedures to ensure this does not happen again?
I can't really do, I think, much more, Moses, than repeat what I said before. It is for the Planning Committee to vote on its own minutes. It's not for me to determine whether those minutes are accurate or not. It's the Planning Committee that has to decide that. In this case, your concerns are represented in the minutes. And I think that is an important point. I can't, I'm afraid, offer you any more than that, but I can repeat the point I made in my answer to your original question, that I understand you are pursuing this matter with the monitoring officer, and that is the right channel to go down.
Dave Edmonds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the Leader of the Council, Councillor Conway. Elected officials are frequently accused of NIMBYism and acting in their own selfish best interests. With this in mind, can the Leader of the Council confirm to the residents of Wokingham Borough the percentage and actual number of the houses within the new local plan that's just been elected that are within 2 miles of where he lives?
Mr. Mayor, I'm answering this question, not the Leader of the Council. The question is based on an entirely false premise in more than one sense. First, the sites allocated for housing in the local plan are mainly sites which were allocated in the Conservatives' revised growth strategy, not put in by the Liberal Democrats. Second, every site that is offered for inclusion in the local plan goes through a rigorous technical assessment by officers to check its suitability. This excludes many sites. The final selection is based on how well each potentially suitable site meets the technical criteria. To select sites on any other basis would make the local plan unsound, and suggesting that that has happened, as your question does, is a slur on the integrity of our officers, as well as a slur on the integrity of the Leader of the Council. But it seems obvious that casting a slur on the integrity of the Leader of the Council is the whole point of your question. When you submitted it, I can imagine you hugging yourself in self-congratulation at having come up with a question that would really stick it to the Liberal Democrats. And in reality, what your question does is expose the fact that you haven't grasped why it was that the Conservatives were roundly rejected by the British public at the general election, suffering their worst results since 1832. The reason people deserted your party was not just your incompetence. It was that they are fed up with your party's nastiness, your hypocrisy, your opportunism, your unwillingness to accept any responsibility, your disregard for the truth, your arrogance, and not least your self-interest, which consistently elevates party above country, and all of which seems to me to be observable in your question.
Dave, do you have a supplementary, please?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I note that neither Councillor Conway or Councillor Bray actually answered the question that I posted. If they're unable to work out how to do it, I can actually show them with a compass how you just put it round and you can count. It's relatively straightforward. I didn't get an answer to mine.
Right. The reason I am replying, not Stephen, is not that Stephen can't defend himself. Sorry, have you not finished? Oh, right. Oh, you're going to...
Can I ask again, are you capable of giving an empirical answer to the question that I asked?
The reason I am replying and not Stephen is not that Stephen can't defend himself, but it is to demonstrate to you not just that the Liberal Democrats are united behind our leader, but to show you what we think of a completely fabricated and pretty contemptible attempt to smear him by creating the impression he has corruptly interfered with the local plan to benefit himself. But thank you for asking a supplementary that confirms that everything I said in my first answer about the Conservatives was correct.
Siona Turtle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member for the Children's Services. The new Labour government has promised to add VAT to private school fees. This will make it more difficult for some people to afford fees for private education and will drive up more demand for secondary school places in the state sector. Several fee-paying schools have announced closure since July because parents are unable to pay more and have withdrawn their children. In addition, the uptake on new places has fallen. What plans has Wokingham Borough Council made to cope with the additional demand?
Sorry. We are aware that the introduction of VAT on independent school fees may have an impact on some residents, and we have responded directly to families who have already been in touch. We currently have spaces available in our primary and secondary schools, although they are not evenly distributed across the borough. We are funding an expansion programme across secondary schools, which is due to add almost 1,000 more spaces over the next 4 years, and we therefore believe that there is sufficient capacity for every local family who wants a school place in the borough to be offered one. But I would add that while it is true that several fee-paying schools have announced closure since July, it is not clear that this is solely or primarily because of the introduction of VAT, and we are not aware of any local schools under threat of closure.
Sienna, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. In my ward, I know of one family who have applied for a place in the local secondary school and has been placed 16th on the waiting list. One of the private schools, also in my ward, has stated 10% of its pupils will be leaving if VAT is imposed. And a private school in Berkshire has seen a drop in demand of 20% for years 6 and 7, which is the most common entry points. So it is in fact happening now that people can't get into the schools. Will you publish an update to all councillors if the policy is implemented and the full effects are known, and when the full effects are known?
I think I can commit that we will do our best to do that, but I would, in the meantime, direct you at the fact that at the executive meeting next week, and I believe the papers have been published, we have our school place strategy coming to executive, which will explain to you how we are going to provide enough places for families. I'm afraid the current situation, sadly, is largely the result of the Conservatives not having planned the places properly before.
Right. We've now come to very nearly 11 o'clock. That's the end of the meeting. The outstanding questions will receive a written response. The other business, particularly motions, will have to be deferred to the next meeting.